What, you're going back home to give birth? I asked incredulously. My mother-in-law shot me a snide grin and remarked, "Why don't you just stay there forever? I don't want to see your freeloading face." Her words stung, but I managed a composed reply. "Sure, take care then." My name is Flo, a 34-year-old professional. I've been dating Barry for 2 years now. We first met at a party where our shared taste in music sparked an instant connection. After exchanging numbers, we started spending our evenings together, discussing everything from favorite tunes to work challenges over drinks at our local bar. Being with Barry was always a joy, and time with him flew by. Eventually, we became a couple, and life has never felt more fulfilling. Despite our busy work schedules, we cherish our weekends together. The anticipation of seeing Barry motivates me to work harder and be more productive during the week. Our relationship had been a cornerstone of my career success. After a year of dating, we decided to take the next step and moved in together. Both of us were serious about our future and the prospect of marriage. Being with him brought a sense of calm and joy, solidifying our mutual desire to marry. Living together before engagement turned out to be a wise choice. It allowed us to understand each other's lifestyles, strengths, and quirks. A year later, my eagerness to marry him remained steadfast, and I eagerly awaited his proposal. Though he had his own timing, I couldn't deny feeling a bit impatient lately. Then, unexpectedly, he invited me to dinner at an upscale restaurant. It wasn't a special occasion, yet I couldn't help but wonder if this was the moment. After work, I arrived at the restaurant, nervous yet tingling with excitement. Upon seeing him, I noticed he was even more nervous than I was. His palpable anxiety strangely eased my own. Despite feeling sorry for his nerves, his awkward and tense greeting actually made me chuckle inwardly. Then came the meal, and throughout, he was visibly nervous. As we finished the main course, he called my name softly, "Chloe." His direct gaze made me slightly apprehensive. "Chloe, you're the most wonderful person I want to cherish. I hope you feel the same about me. So, will you marry me?" With those heartfelt words, he presented a ring. My answer was already clear. Yes, I can't wait for our life together. With our engagement sealed, I was overwhelmed with happiness. However, life soon became hectic, and the joy was fleeting. We had to meet each other's families, organize family gatherings, and begin wedding preparations. Balancing all this alongside our demanding work schedules was a challenge, but Barry and I found ways to carve out time and move forward with our plans. When I introduced Barry to my parents, they took a liking to him right away, impressed by his sincerity. Their approval meant a lot to me, and I was grateful they welcomed our decision to marry. However, when it came time to visit Barry's parents, things took an unexpected turn. "You're Barry's fiancé. You seem rather plain," remarked Barry's mother, bluntly upon our first meeting. Taken aback by her comment, I felt knocked down. Barry quickly interjected, "Mom, what are you saying? She's the woman I chose." That was pretty rude. Shrugged defensively. "I'm just being honest, you know." Barry's father, Will, stepped in, trying to diffuse the tension. "Enough, that's uncalled for." Despite Barry and his father's attempts to defend me, I couldn't shake off the hurt from R's words. Later, Barry apologized. "Chloe, I'm sorry about my mom. She's always been straightforward, sometimes too much. I've never been comfortable with it either." "Really?" I asked, surprised by his admission. "Yeah, so please don't let her words get to you. If she says anything after we're married, let me know right away. I'll handle it," he assured me earnestly. His words brought me relief. From the moment we started dating, Barry had shown he would protect me, even attempting to shield me during our introduction to his parents. Still, my apprehensions persisted, especially regarding the impending family meeting. I couldn't shake the worry that R would disrespect my parents too. Despite my warnings to Barry, he had assured me he would handle her carefully, and I had even briefed my parents about R's challenging nature, which they were already familiar with from past encounters. The day of the family meeting finally arrived, and my nerves were on edge for entirely different reasons. "Hello, I'm Barry's dad. It's a pleasure to meet you. Thank you for having us," Will greeted warmly, extending a hand to my parents. "We're Chloe's mom and dad," my parents replied politely, trying to keep the atmosphere pleasant. They exchanged pleasantries with Will, but R remained silent, seating herself and ordering a drink without a word. "I'll take a red wine. Looks like we'll need a bit of a drink to make this interesting," she commented casually, her words casting an uncomfortable shadow over the room. My parents were left speechless by R's behavior. visibly taken aback. Both Wilt and Barry, clearly annoyed, swiftly apologized to us for our conduct. And so, the family meeting commenced. My parents and Wilt hit it off right away, engaging in friendly conversation. Throughout the meal, R remained largely focused on her food, but as she became increasingly intoxicated, she started to interject into the conversation. A government job, it may be stable, but the pay isn't anything to brag about. Barry's marrying into such boring people. If they have kids, they'll probably be just as dull, R remarked, crossing a line with her words. That's enough, Wilt intervened, his voice filled with anger. You need to leave now. R appeared defiant, muttering, what's the big deal? I'm just being honest. Wilt escorted R outside and arranged for her to take a cab home. Returning to the restaurant, he and Barry apologized once more for R's behavior. I was relieved that we had reserved a private room. R had proven to be more of a challenge than expected at the wedding. She seemed subdued, likely because Wilt had warned her to behave impeccably or face consequences. Apparently, he had even threatened divorce if she caused any embarrassment, so she kept her comments to herself. Thankfully, the wedding went off without a hitch, and I was grateful for that. Thus, our married life began in earnest. Barry and I had a wonderful relationship, making our life together blissful. We both shared household responsibilities equally to ensure neither of us felt burdened. It was a bonus that Barry excelled in cooking. I always looked forward to his meals. On days when he got caught up at work but still took on the chef's role, we would cook together. This collaboration made our days together as a happy couple all the more enjoyable. Barry made an effort to visit his family home alone as much as possible, mindful of both R and myself. Thanks to this, I was spared any direct snide remarks or confrontations from R. I deeply appreciated Barry's consideration during this time. However, tragedy struck when Wilt suddenly fell ill and passed away. Barry and I rushed to the hospital, but we arrived too late. Dad, Barry exclaimed in disbelief. Wilt's death hit him hard, and R was visibly distraught as well. How could you leave me like this? Despite my strained relationship with R, I couldn't help but empathize with her grief in that moment. I mourned the loss of Wilt, who had always treated me with kindness. In the following days, we found ourselves consumed with funeral arrangements while navigating our own grief. Barry took charge of organizing everything, and I did what I could to support him during this difficult time. The funeral proceeded smoothly, and we felt we had given Wilt a fitting farewell. Life eventually settled back to its routine for Barry and me. While it took time to come to terms with Wilt's passing, we eventually found our footing. Barry appeared determined to move forward with renewed resolve. However, a new challenge emerged unexpectedly. Barry, Chloe, please help me. Our sudden appearance at our doorstep caught us off guard. Mom, what's wrong? Barry asked, clearly unsettled by the unusual atmosphere. R's demeanor softened as she spoke. Since your father passed, I've been feeling terribly lonely every day. Nothing seems to taste right anymore. I just wanted to see the faces of my only family, my son and his wife. Her words seemed genuine, her vulnerability evident. Could you let me stay with you for a little while? She asked, her request tinged with desperation. Barry and I were taken aback by her request. I feel like I'll be crushed by loneliness if things continue like this, she pleaded. We hesitated, but reasoned that a short stay wouldn't hurt. R seemed so fragile. We doubted she had the energy to be hostile towards me. So we agreed to live together, and surprisingly, R behaved maturely. She even took on some household chores. I'm staying in your home. It's the least I can do. Thank you, Flo. You're a lifesaver, she expressed gratefully. Both Barry and I appreciated R's efforts. Life seemed manageable if things stayed this way. However, after about 3 months, R began reverting to her old habits bit by bit. Flo, are you not planning to quit your job? Isn't it normal for wives to stop working? But you've been working all this time. I started to respond, but R's tone grew harsher, indicating she was returning to her old self. I turned to Barry immediately. Okay, we need to talk to Mom and get her to go back to her hometown right away, I said. When Barry confronted R about it, her response was startling. I've already sold the family home, she admitted. Barry and I exchanged shocked glances. Mom, why would you do that without even discussing it with us? That's our family home. I inherited it from your dad. Selling it was my decision, R defended herself. But you should have at least informed us, Barry replied, visibly frustrated. I forgot, sorry. Now I have nowhere else to go, so please don't kick me out, R pleaded. Barry and I were left speechless. Just as we were grappling with this unexpected turn of events, another surprise came our way. I discovered I was pregnant. Verity and I were overjoyed. We had been hoping for a child but had almost given up due to our age, so this was wonderful news. However, the prospect of dealing with R while pregnant added a new layer of complexity to our situation. Recently, she started complaining again. I recounted to Barry. Why do I have to cook for you too? I'm only staying here because of Barry, not you. Traditionally, it's the wife who handles all the housework, Barry explained. R would cook only for herself and me, and she'd do her laundry but avoid yours. Barry would reprimand her, and she'd feign remorse only to repeat the behavior. I was at my wit's end. Feeling the need to escape, I decided to begin my maternity leave early and return to my parents' home. When I discussed this with Barry, he proposed a solution that we both agreed on, and we began to make arrangements. I promptly informed R of our decision and started preparing to leave. You're going back home to give birth? Yes, I feel it's necessary for a safer childbirth, even though I understand it means leaving household duties behind. Barry supports this decision. Upon hearing this, R smirked and sneered. Why not just stay at your parents' house forever? I don't want to see your parasitic face around here anyway. I bet even Barry's had enough of you. You don't need to come back to this house anymore. I couldn't help but feel a sense of relief at R's harsh words. All right then, take care, I replied calmly. I returned to my parents' house, grateful to be with them again after so long. They've been incredibly supportive, allowing me to find peace and comfort during this time. A month later, Barry arrived at my parents' house with news. I finally got the green light from work. I found us a new place. That's fantastic. Barry's plan was for us to transition to remote work, which his company had approved. Thoughtfully, he rented an apartment near my parents' home, and we decided to move there. Barry then terminated the lease on the room R had been staying in and finalized our move to the new apartment. Apparently, R was quite unsettled by this, and she called me. Hey Chloe, where are you? I'm at our new place with Barry. New place? Where? R's voice sounded urgent and somewhat panicked. I'll let you know, but I have to be honest. The lease here is being canceled and everything's being moved out. I can't stay here anymore, I explained calmly. Barry and I are starting fresh somewhere else. But Barry said he's cutting ties with me. He doesn't want to talk to you anymore, I added, trying to make her understand. So, you were just pretending to be nice to stay here, huh? This was your plan because you couldn't make any money from selling the house you got from Wilt, right? R accused sharply. How did you find out? You were telling the neighbors how frustrated you were that the house your husband left had no value. Then suddenly, it became a lot for sale. People just can't keep quiet about things like that. Give me Barry back. I'm that kid's parent, so I have the right to live with him. As I've said before, he doesn't want to see you, and I won't pressure him into something he's uncomfortable with. Upon hearing this, R exploded with irrational anger. Who do you think you are? Acting all high and mighty when you're just a broke, freeloading plain wife? That's not a nice thing to say, but it's true. Well, I don't think our paths will cross much in the future, so it doesn't really concern me, I replied calmly. But let me clarify something. Alongside my full-time job, I also have a side gig, and I actually earn more than Barry, I continued. Oh, really? What's this side gig? R asked skeptically. I initially studied web design, so I've been taking on projects in that field. With both my full-time salary and freelance work, I'm bringing in about $7,000 a month, I explained. What? That much? That's more than Wilt used to make. R was left speechless upon learning about my true financial situation. Clearly, she hadn't expected that her underestimated wife was earning that much. But none of this concerns you. R. Barry has cut ties with you, and I'll be distancing myself even further, I asserted firmly. Wait a minute, if you're making that kind of money, maybe you could lend me a hand, R suggested. I didn't hesitate. I ended the call and blocked her number. It was a relief to expose R's true intentions and leave her feeling regretful. Knowing I wouldn't have to deal with her again brought me a sense of peace. She had no knowledge of where my parents lived or where I worked. With Barry working remotely and our new address undisclosed to her, the likelihood of R tracking us down was minimal. I've heard that R has always struggled with overspending, and whatever inheritance Wilt left behind has dwindled to almost nothing. She attempted to sell the house but received a low offer, leaving her in financial trouble. However, old habits die hard. A neighbor from our former neighborhood reached out to Barry and informed us that our spending habits and reliance on payday loans have plunged her into debt. She's been asking neighbors for loans without success, leading to a challenging financial situation. It seems like karma has caught up with her. Meanwhile, Barry and I no longer have to worry about R intruding into our lives. We're enjoying a peaceful existence, splitting our time between our own home and my parents' place as I prepare for the birth of our child. Once the baby arrives, Barry and I are looking forward to nurturing our family and cherishing our time together.
In a world where I thought love was a language I'd never speak, his words, "Would you consider going out with me?" struck a chord I never knew I had. I stared blankly at Jude, stunned by his bold invitation. Me, the office recluse, being asked out by one of our most personable clients. It seemed unfathomable. "I know this seems out of the blue," he continued with a warm smile, "but I've wanted to get to know you better for a while now. You intrigue me." I felt my cheeks flush as I scrambled for words. My instinct was to politely decline and retreat to my safe solitary office, but something in his gentle eyes chipped away at my guarded facade. I'd love to," I managed, the words escaping before I could overanalyze their implication. His face lit up with pleasant surprise. "Yeah, great. Are you free Friday night?" I nodded, suddenly feeling shy as scattered memories of high school dances and my college roommates' many suitors flashed through my mind. My scant romantic history felt woefully inadequate preparation for an evening alone with Jude. As we exchanged numbers, planning the location and time, apprehension and excitement dueled within me. I had always admired Jude from afar, drawn to his affable confidence and easy charm. But I never imagined his interest would extend to someone like me, the office introvert who preferred headphones and spreadsheets to happy hours with colleagues. That Friday evening, I agonized over my outfit, changing 3 times before settling on a simple black dress and heels. I barely recognized my reflection, a far cry from the jeans and blouses I lived in at the office. As the Uber approached the restaurant, my nerves kicked into overdrive. "You can do this," I told myself. "Just make conversation." I was greeted by the scent of grilled meat and raucous laughter as I walked through the doors. The buzz of a Friday night crowd set my anxiety on edge. But then I spotted Jude waving at a small table nestled in a quiet corner. His smile eased my tension. "You look beautiful," he said, pulling out my chair. I lowered myself down, smoothing my dress self-consciously. "This place is really nice. Do you come here a lot?" I asked. As we fell into casual banter about local restaurants, my nervousness gradually gave way. Jude's presence was disarming, engaged but relaxed, funny but thoughtful. Our conversation drifted seamlessly from work to hobbies to childhood memories over steak frites and wine. I barely touched my food, too caught up in his entertaining stories to think about eating. Jude jumped from topic to topic with enthusiastic ease, while I mainly listened, interjecting occasional questions or reactions. Despite my tendency to avoid eye contact, I found myself stealing glances at his bright amber eyes as he spoke. After the plates were cleared, Jude glanced at his watch. "I didn't mean to keep you so late. I know it's a work night." "Oh, that's okay," I said quickly. In truth, I had barely noticed the passing hours in his company. As we walked out to catch our Ubers, Jude gently brushed his hand against mine. The subtle contact sent a spark through my skin. "I had a wonderful time, Alara," he said softly. "Would you want to go out again next weekend?" I nodded, suddenly unable to find my voice. As my Uber pulled up, Jude leaned in, planting a delicate kiss on my cheek. "Good night," he whispered before turning to leave. I watched him disappear into the night, my fingers touching the spot his lips had grazed. The chord he struck within me now hummed with new life. I knew in that electric moment that my world would never be the solitary place it once was. Our bliss lasted only a few short years before life threw its first major obstacle at us. Barely 2 years into our marriage, Jude's promising startup collapsed almost overnight, the victim of embezzlement by a duplicitous business partner. I still remember Jude's ashen face when he told me the news over the phone. "It's all gone, Alara. Everything." His voice cracked as he explained how his conniving co-founder had drained their accounts before disappearing without a trace. My heart ached for my kind-hearted husband, knowing how much blood and sweat he had poured into his company. I rushed to meet him, enveloping his slumped frame in my arms. "I'm so sorry, Jude," I whispered, holding him tightly. "We'll get through this. I promise." In the months that followed, we slowly adjusted to our new financial reality. The lease on our trendy apartment was not renewed. Designer brands and upscale restaurants were replaced with thrift stores and home cooking. Jude fell into a period of despair, struggling to pull himself out of bed most mornings, much less send out job applications. Eventually, our dwindling savings forced my hand. One late night, Jude came home to find me sitting solemnly at our kitchen table. "We can't avoid it anymore. One of us needs a steady job with benefits," I said gently. Jude stared at the floor silently before sinking into the chair across from me. "I know," he finally replied, his voice laced with shame. "I'm trying, Alara. These past few months have been difficult." I reached for his hand reassuringly. "Let me job hunt for a while. My background may make it easier for me to find something quickly." Though it wounded his pride, Jude eventually conceded. Within a few weeks, I leveraged my financial analysis skills into a mid-level position at a thriving corporation. Meanwhile, Jude half-heartedly submitted applications, his enthusiasm still dampened. Upon receiving my first paycheck, I surprised Jude with dinner at our favorite upscale restaurant, but instead of delighting him, the extravagant evening seemed to underscore his feelings of failure. "We can't afford this, Alara," he said sullenly, eyeing the polished surroundings. "Not on an administrative assistant's salary." Stung by his thoughtless words, I bit my tongue to restrain a retort. Later, I tried gently broaching his comment, but Jude refused to discuss it further. As I drifted to sleep that night, an uneasy feeling stirred within me. The dynamics of our relationship were shifting, but to what end I did not yet know. Over the next year, Jude cycled through short-lived contract jobs while my career advanced rapidly. Each of my promotions and pay raises seemed to drive the wedge between us in deeper. Pleasant dinners would suddenly flip into moody silences if I mentioned work. Offhand comments about my lucky break stung. But Jude's biggest blow came on the heels of my latest achievement, a senior manager role that nearly doubled my prior income. I arrived home thrilled to share the good news, only to find Jude pacing angrily. "I can't keep doing this," he erupted before I could even speak. "Watching you succeed so effortlessly while I flounder. Why did I bother with college when you make twice my income without even trying?" I stood speechless, stricken by his verbal attack. "Jude, that's not fair," I finally responded, fighting back tears. "My job requires 80-hour weeks and extensive travel. You know I would happily trade places." "Oh, please," he scoffed. "You love the fancy office and business trips. Don't pretend this hasn't been the best thing that ever happened to your career." As his cruel words echoed through our silent apartment, an image of the gentle man I married flickered in my mind. The man now standing before me, twisted by envy and pride, felt like a stranger. My heart broke realizing the Jude I loved may be gone forever. The months following Jude's outburst dragged on, our relationship strained by unspoken hurts. My demanding job kept me traveling frequently, leaving little time to mend the widening rift between us. During a rare extended stay home, I was surprised to find a sharply dressed Jude waiting with 2 glasses of wine when I returned one evening. "Congratulations are in order," he declared, handing me a glass. "I started a new position today, at Richardson Financial." I stared blankly, struggling to process this sudden news after so many months adrift. Jude continued explaining his role as a junior broker at the prestigious firm while I nodded mutely. "This is wonderful news," I finally managed. "What prompted you to apply there specifically?" Jude refilled our glasses, his mood buoyant. "I realized I couldn't sulk forever, and I know Richardson was on your dream company's list from business school." I detected an unspoken message in his pointed remark. By choosing a firm I admired, perhaps Jude hoped to prevent any envy on my part. I brushed the implication aside, focusing on my relief at this positive development. Over celebratory pasta, Jude enthusiastically outlined his plans to quickly climb the corporate ladder. I smiled encouragingly, though uncertainty lurked at the back of my mind. Jude's checkered employment history left me skeptical of his staying power in the notoriously cutthroat environment, but I kept silent, not wanting to dampen his fledgling confidence. "Well, I'm off to bed," Jude said, kissing my cheek after dinner. 5 a.m. comes early when you actually have somewhere to be." I awoke the next morning to find Jude already gone. A quickly scrawled note on the counter wished me a nice day. As I surveyed the remnants of last night's feast, I felt a palpable emptiness. I longed for the days when lazy Saturday mornings meant lingering in bed together before tackling chores or enjoying leisurely brunch dates. Over the next few months, Jude and I mostly passed like ships in the night. My global travel increased substantially with a major product launch, leaving me perpetually jet-lagged. Meanwhile, Jude rapidly advanced at Richardson Financial, regularly working 12-plus-hour days. We traded quick voicemails and the occasional takeout dinner, too exhausted for meaningful interaction. But slowly, our financial state improved with Jude's rising income. We moved into a more spacious apartment closer to Richardson's headquarters. Jude leased a shiny BMW to match his new professional persona. My pay bumps had bought us time, but now Jude's earnings afforded us true stability. I noticed small changes, too. Jude's expensive haircuts, new custom-tailored suits, and sudden golf habit with the guys from work. During my fleeting visits home, Jude entertained me with amusing corporate stories, though names and context often blurred together. "Richardson sure keeps you busy, I commented one night after Jude dismissed a call from a colleague. "Yeah, it's nonstop, but that's life in this industry," he replied. As he detailed his latest high-profile case, Jude's face glowed with vigor and pride. The shadow of resentment and defeat I had watched haunt him these past years finally lifted. My husband had returned, though in an unexpected form. With our careers firmly stabilized and finances on the rebound, I optimistically hoped our marriage, too, could now begin healing. Surely this new upward trajectory marked the end of our relationship woes. Or so my naive heart believed at the time. But unbeknownst to either of us, an unpredictable storm brewed just over the horizon, one that would change the course of our lives forever. I quit. Jude's fork halted midair, a bit of egg dangling precipitously. "You what?" I took a deep breath, grasping my mimosa tightly. "I quit my job as of today." Jude slowly lowered his fork to the plate with a gentle clink. "I don't understand. Why would you quit without discussing it with me first?" "I know, I'm sorry," I replied. It was an impulsive decision, but the timing felt right. I went on to explain my growing disenchantment with the corporate rat race, the endless slog of meetings and metrics, losing sight of any real purpose. And then an email landed offering me a lucrative freelance financial writing position. Before I could overthink it, I resigned. Jude rubbed his temple, processing this bombshell development. I braced myself for criticism over my rash choice. "Well, I support you," he finally said. "I know how miserable all that travel made you. Just promise you won't become some starving artist now," he added with a wink. I laughed, relief washing over me. "I make more per hour now than with a salary. We'll be fine." In my euphoria over dumping my corporate shackles, I failed to notice Jude's smile not quite reaching his eyes. Over the next few months, I settled happily into my new remote freelance role. The flexible schedule afforded me time to pursue photography and pottery classes, long-neglected passions. With Jude frequently working late, I cherished reconnecting with these creative interests. One evening, while crafting a vase, Jude arrived home unusually early, and not alone. I turned to find an immaculately dressed elderly woman clutching his arm. "Alara, meet my mother Mara," Jude announced. "She'll be staying with us a while." I froze, struggling to process this unexpected guest now surveying my clay-splattered apron with thinly veiled disdain. Jude had never once mentioned his mother coming to visit, much less live with us. "Wonderful to meet you," I managed faintly. "How long exactly was a while?" In the uncomfortable days that followed, I learned Mara's husband had recently passed away after a long illness. According to Jude, the loss left her too fragile to care for their suburban home alone. I empathized with her grief, even as her imposing presence invaded our home. Mara scrutinized our apartment with pursed lips. The modern artwork, my orchid garden, Jude's beloved jazz vinyl collection. Everything seemed to offend her traditional sensibilities. Without asking, she rearranged furniture to allow proper flow, and stocked our kitchen with bizarre health concoctions. Worst of all, Mara's constant, unsolicited advice infuriated me. She critiqued my writing career as a flighty pastime, suggested I dress more modestly, and outright condemned the premarital intimacy Jude and I shared, in our own home. I urged Jude to intervene about his mother's behavior multiple times, but he merely shrugged, responding, "It's just her way. She means well." As Mara's presence infiltrated each room like an invasive species, I sensed my sanctuary dissolving. Lying awake at night, I listened anxiously to Jude reassuring his mother through the thin walls after every minor stressor. The man I once considered my closest confidant now reserved that role for the intruder down the hall who eyed me like a troublesome child. And somehow I had allowed this. The passive husband and domineering mother now controlled our home, while I willingly relinquished my power just to keep the peace. The realization churned a growing fury I could no longer contain. The shrill ringing of my cell phone jarred me from sleep. I fumbled groggily for the device, Jude's name flashing urgently on the screen. "Hello, Jude?" "Alara." His voice was strained with a chilling edge I'd never heard before. "The police just left. Get back here now." The line went dead before I could respond. I stared at the phone, my groggy mind racing through possible emergencies. Sirens blaring past my hotel had awoken me just an hour ago. Were we robbed? Surely no mere household mishap warranted Jude's cryptic tone. I hurriedly dressed and raced home, pacing tensely as the Uber crawled through early morning traffic. I arrived to find an eerie quiet, no signs of forced entry or robbery, but the acidic scent of bleach hung cloyingly in the air. I moved cautiously through each room, ledgering the undisturbed valuables with confusion before noticing the bathroom. Harsh fluorescent light spilled into the hall from the ajar door. Inside, I gasped to discover blood smeared across the newly scrubbed tile walls. The metallic stench overwhelmed me. I clutched the doorway in horror. What had happened here? Just then Jude emerged, his shirt and hands still speckled with scarlet stains. Upon seeing me, his mouth twisted into a snarl. "There you are. This is your doing," he hissed, jabbing his finger toward the lurid scene. "I told the police what really happened, even covered up your rage tantrum, but if you ever lay hands on my mother again—" "What? Jude, I just got home. What on earth are you saying?" I cried. His bizarre accusation made no sense. But before I could plead further, Mara appeared behind Jude's shoulder, an exaggerated slump in her usually ramrod posture. "I tried so hard to keep the peace between you two," she whimpered pathetically. As Jude comforted his clearly unharmed mother, their distorted narrative finally registered. They had concocted this elaborate scene to frame me as unstable and violent. My hands curled involuntarily into fists as I marched toward Mara, ready to confront her deceit. Sensing imminent confrontation, Jude swiftly positioned himself between us. "Officer Costas allowed us to handle this discreetly, since Mother isn't pressing charges," he said. "But he assured me they'll be keeping close watch." I opened my mouth to refute Jude's outrageous threat, but stopped short. Their determination to paint me as an aggressor was suddenly clear. Engaging would only legitimize this infuriating fabrication. Without a word, I turned my back on them and retreated outside to calm my spiraling thoughts. Over the next week, Jude and Mara carried on with their fraudulent charade. She wore a wrist brace for her sprain, while neighbors and Jude's colleagues received anonymous warnings about my concerning temper. My existence became an endless gauntlet of thinly veiled antagonism and betrayal. Soon after, while enjoying a rare solitary afternoon, the doorbell's obnoxious chime broke my focus. I opened it reluctantly, worried Jude had forgotten his keys again, only to find an unfamiliar gentleman clutching a thick folder. "Good afternoon, ma'am. I'm Anthony Giles, Social Services," he stated. "I'll need to speak with you about the incident on the 16th. Before I could protest, he stepped inside, flicking open his folder dramatically to begin his interrogation. As Mr. Giles bombarded me with patronizing questions, implying my guilt, fury and frustration welled up dangerously. But I knew reacting emotionally would only legitimize his suspicions. So I calmly recounted my factual innocence despite his transparent agenda against me. Fortunately, he left empty-handed but warned further outbursts would involve children's services regarding my ability to safely parent. Shutting the door firmly against his retreating back, hot tears finally spilled down my cheeks. The realization crashed over me. To save myself, I had to abandon this house of lies. No matter the cost. I awoke well before sunrise, Jude's whistling snores grating in my ear, Slipping silently from beneath the sheets, I tucked my pre-packed bag by the front door and contemplated my next move. Today was the day. I would finally confront Jude about the cruise brochures and love poems stashed in his gym bag that confirmed my worst fears. For weeks, an unshakable feeling in my gut whispered Jude was having an affair. When traces first surfaced, I rationalized them away, not yet ready to destroy our already fractured bond. But the mounting evidence now demanded action. As I brewed coffee, I had no intention of drinking. My mind raced through potential scripts for the impending confrontation. Jude often left his work phone unattended on the counter, my chance to gather final proof. When I heard the buzz of a new text notification, my pulse quickened. I tapped the phone gently, stomach churning as the lock screen preview exposed everything. Lurid messages from a contact named Lola Peach filled the screen, leaving nothing to doubt. As I scrolled in horror, hot tears spilled down my cheeks at the graphic descriptions of past rendezvous and enthusiastic plans for reconnecting post-cruise. In that moment, something severed deep within me. The tenuous threads still clinging to hope or denial now snapped entirely. I backed away from the damning device, resolve cementing. Today the pretense would end. I busied myself with mundane tidying, awaiting signs of life from the bedroom. Before long, Mara emerged scowling. News of my resignation last week from the volunteer board she convinced me to join had earned persistent cold shoulders. "Morning, Mara," I offered politely. Her responding sneer said everything. As she shambled off to the couch, Jude finally surfaced. I steeled myself for the showdown ahead. "Jude, do you have a minute to chat?" I asked as casually as possible. He glanced at his watch distractedly while gathering work items scattered around the kitchen. "Can it wait, babe?" "Big presentation today," came his dismissive reply. In the past, I would have uttered a timid, "no problem," before sending him off with a forced smile, but not today. "I'm afraid this can't wait," I said firmly, blocking his path. "We need to discuss your upcoming cruise and Lola Peach." I watched the color drain from his face. "What are you talking about?" he sputtered unconvincingly. "I don't know any Lo." "Save it," I snapped. Months of suppressed rage now roared loose. "I'm done with your lies. I saw the disgusting messages you left open on your phone. How long did you think you could keep screwing this whore behind my back?" His lips pressed into a rigid line. Before he could reply, an anguished wail erupted from the couch. We turned to see Mara stagger toward us, heaving with dramatic sobs. "I can't bear this cruelty," she cried. "Jude, she's set on destroying this family over pure fantasy." Jude rushed to comfort her, while casting me an icy glare that screamed, "How could you upset my mother this way?" In past arguments, Mara weaponizing her emotions could shame me into silence, but her histrionic meltdown only hardened my resolve now. Without another word to either of them, I stepped outside, slamming the front door with an earth-shaking finality. As my Uber sped away, I grasped the full reality of what I was fleeing, a pathological narcissist twisted by jealousy. Her weak-willed puppet son, so easily manipulated. Their toxic delusions threatened to subsume me completely. Well, not anymore. Today my emancipation began. In the weeks following my dramatic exit, I immersed myself in dismantling the intricate web of lies Jude and his mother had woven. Meticulously documenting their misdeeds became my obsession. I dodged Jude's endless calls and texts, ranging from righteous indignation to desperate pleas for reconciliation. Responding emotionally served no strategic purpose. Instead, I quietly retained cutthroat attorneys and private investigators, methodically building irrefutable cases of infidelity and slander. With my evidence nearing courtroom-ready status, I decided the time had come for a final confrontation on my terms. I invited Jude and Mara to meet at a posh restaurant downtown, sending the address anonymously to pique their curiosity. Right on time, I spotted Jude entering with Mara clinging possessively to his elbow. Good, they took the bait. Allowing them a few minutes to settle uncomfortably at the table, I finally made my entrance. "You actually came. Bravo," I announced acidly, relishing their shocked expressions at my abrupt arrival. Without waiting for a response, I opened my briefcase and theatrically flung 2 manila folders onto the tablecloth, their damning labels clearly visible. Folder 1, Infidelity. Folder 2, Emotional Abuse and Slander. Jude visibly paled while Mara's razor-sharp eyes narrowed. Whatever nonsense this contains holds no weight, she scoffed. You always were drama queen. Ignoring Mara's delusional barbs, I focused intently on Jude. The folder contents will speak for themselves, but allow me to summarize. For the next excruciating half hour, I calmly detailed Jude's long-running affair and sexting habits backed by photographic evidence, private investigator reports, and credit card receipts. Mara sputtered baseless denials until Jude finally admitted guilt in a choked whisper. Well, she drove you to it, Mara shrieked. A wife should meet her husband's needs to prevent wandering eyes. Slamming my palm violently on the table, I cut her repulsive tirade short. You will not defend his behavior. He is a grown man responsible for his abhorrent choices. Turning my glare back to Jude, I continued, and according to the investigator, Lola Peach is just one of several women you've maintained relations with. Jude hastily tried placating me by questioning the ethics of hiring spies, but my bone-chilling stare silenced further protests. After a few moments, I resumed my diatribe by exposing their slanderous hoax, portraying me as violent and unstable. I have signed affidavits from the responding officers and social workers strongly disputing your perjured claims, I concluded, shoving the paperwork toward them contemptuously. Watching Jude visibly withdrawing into his seat like a scorned child while Mara seethed quietly was profoundly satisfying. I rose calmly from my seat, gathering the damning evidence now scattered across the table. Consider this your one warning to cease spreading vicious lies about me to salvage your shredded reputations. I still have ample ammunition left if necessary for courtroom proceedings. Leaving them speechless amidst the upended wreckage of secrets and lies, I strode briskly towards sweet freedom. The bindings tethering me to their dysfunction now dissolved fully. I was finally free. Watching the moving truck disappear around the corner, I sighed deeply. The bittersweet pang of signing the divorce papers just hours earlier still lingered, but any residual heartache faded, standing here on the curb before my very own food truck, its cheerful teal paint gleaming brightly in the afternoon sun. My hard-won independence never tasted sweeter. In the 18 months since I confronted Jude and Mara with their deceitful transgressions, much had changed. With an excellent attorney's help, I leveraged the extensive documentation of Jude's philandering against any sympathy for Mara's fictitious abuse claims. The judge took a dim view of their elaborate hoax and utter lack of remorse, as he deemed in the divorce proceedings. Stripped of his polished veneer before the court, Jude acquiesced quickly to my terms, eager to avoid further public scrutiny. The settlement awarded me full ownership of our lavish apartment and 75% of all remaining assets. Jude slunk away in disgrace to lick his wounds, Mara in tow. She had attempted clinging to false reconciliation promises, but I wouldn't be moved. In the quiet aftermath, I blossomed in solitude's fertile soil. My writing career flourished now that energy formerly spent tiptoeing around volatility could be channeled into professional and personal growth. I traveled widely, cultivated new friendships, and most importantly, I cooked. Having rediscovered my passion for fusing flavors during darker days, I began hosting pop-up dining experiences from our apartment. My culinary skills, coupled with charming hospitality, quickly attracted a cult following. Soon, devoted patrons clamored for my signature roasted duck confit tacos and cardamom creme brulee well beyond makeshift dinner parties. When the owner of a failing food truck approached proposing partnership, the universe seemed to align perfectly with my entrepreneurial visions. I invested a chunk of savings into revitalizing the charming little hut on wheels into a truly eye-catching mobile kitchen. Bold teal paint and twinkling string lights attracted droves of curious admirers from the outset, but perhaps most satisfying was discovering genuine romance unexpectedly. During my first promotional photo shoot for Alara's, I clicked instantly with the talented photographer Graham over sharing travel tales while scouting locations. Our coffees afterwards kindled into deeper connection. Unlike Jude's love bombing, Graham's affections grew steadily out of genuine compatibility and mutual respect. On our recent trip celebrating the new truck launch, Graham mused the stunning vineyard views looked ideal for a small, intimate vow exchange someday soon. My heart fluttered hearing this wonderful man, with no ulterior motives, speak so earnestly of our future together. Just then, my reminiscing was interrupted by the loud rumble of the first guest's arrival, my dear friend and unofficial catering assistant, Eva. She had proven an invaluable pillar of support when other fair-weather friends scattered after my dizzying descent from corporate executive's wife to scandalous tabloid feature. I embraced her warmly. "Well, no backing out now," I joked. "Did those glowing Instagram stories I sent over pique your interest?" "Are you kidding? I've been craving duck tacos all week after that preview." She laughed. "Now stop keeping me from that sublime food and go wow all these strangers." Grinning broadly, I fired up the grill with infectious enthusiasm. Tonight marked the genesis of my hard-won new existence, one defined not by toxic gazes or dancers hiding in the wings waiting to step on broken dreams. Instead, possibility and autonomy shone brightly, their rays feeding seeds for whatever rich future I chose to cultivate next. One scrumptious taco at a time.
I stared at the iced tea dripping down my silk blouse, watching the amber liquid seep into the fabric like a growing bloodstain. The silence in the dining room was absolute, broken only by the soft plink of ice cubes hitting the hardwood floor. My name is Ruby, and this was the moment my mother-in-law decided to destroy my marriage. "Oh dear," Linda said, her voice dripping with false concern. My hand must have slipped. She placed the empty pitcher on the table with deliberate care, her manicured fingers lingering on the crystal handle. I could feel every eye in the room on me. Jake's bewildered stare, Melanie's poorly concealed smirk, even little Emily's wide-eyed shock from her booster seat. The Sunday roast lay forgotten, steam still rising from the perfectly arranged plates. "Let me help you clean up." Jake started to rise, but Linda's hand shot out, gripping his wrist. "Actually, before anyone moves, I have something that needs addressing." She reached into her designer handbag, pulling out a thick manila envelope. "These arrived yesterday, and I think now is the perfect time to discuss them." My stomach clenched as she slid the envelope across the table, leaving it just out of reach of the spreading tea puddle. I didn't need to open it to know what it contained. The familiar legal letterhead was visible through the paper. "Divorce papers," Linda announced to the room, as if introducing the next course. "Already filled out. All Jake needs to do is sign." I turned to my husband, searching his face for any sign of surprise, any hint that this was as much of an ambush for him as it was for me. But Jake wouldn't meet my eyes, suddenly fascinated by his untouched mashed potatoes. "You knew about this?" My voice came out steadier than I felt. "Ruby, honey," Linda cut in before Jake could respond. "Let's not make this more dramatic than it needs to be. We all know this marriage isn't working. Jake needs someone who understands family values, someone who can support his dreams instead of." She gestured vaguely at my tea-soaked appearance. "Whatever this is." Melanie snorted into her wine glass. "At least you didn't ruin one of your good outfits, Rubes." This one was clearly from the clearance rack. I stood up slowly, feeling the cold liquid running down my spine. "Jake," I said quietly, "look at me." He raised his head finally, and what I saw in his eyes told me everything. This wasn't a sudden decision. This wasn't even his mother's idea, not entirely. This was premeditated, calculated, and I'd been too blind to see it coming. 8 years, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. 8 years of marriage, and you let your mother dump iced tea on me before serving divorce papers. "It's not like that," he started, but I was already moving. I picked up my own glass of wine, a full-bodied red that Linda had been saving for a special occasion, and walked around the table with measured steps. Linda's smug expression faltered slightly as I approached. "You're right about one thing," I said, standing over her. "This marriage isn't working." I tipped the glass, watching the red wine cascade over her perfectly coiffed hair, down her expensive white blouse. "But you're wrong about who needs to understand family values." Emily giggled from her seat, quickly stifled by Melanie's sharp shush. I turned on my heel and walked toward the door, pausing only to grab my car keys from the entry table. Behind me, I could hear Linda's outraged sputtering and Jake's weak attempts to calm her down. "Ruby, wait," Jake called after me. I didn't wait. I didn't look back. But I made a promise to myself as I stepped into the evening air. This wasn't over. Not by a long shot. The hotel room keycard trembled in my hand as memories of our first date flooded back. Jake had worn that ridiculous blue tie with cartoon ducks on it, claiming it was his lucky charm. I'd found it endearing then, his nervous energy, his grand dreams of starting his own business empire. Now, 8 years later, that same tie hung in our closet, pristine and unworn, while my credit cards groaned under the weight of his failed ventures. My phone buzzed. Another message from Jake. Please come home. We can talk about this. I tossed the phone onto the bed and started pacing. The same bed where I'd spent the last 3 hours scrolling through our joint bank accounts, watching our life together dissolve into a series of suspicious transactions and unexplained withdrawals. A knock at the door made me freeze. Ruby. Melanie's voice. I know you're in there. I considered ignoring her, but curiosity won out. When I opened the door, she pushed past me, reeking of expensive perfume and desperation. You're making a huge mistake, she said, dropping onto the room's single chair. Jake's a mess. Mom's furious. This isn't how family handles things. Family? I leaned against the wall, arms crossed. Is that what we're calling it now? Don't be dramatic. So Mom got a little carried away with the tea thing. But you had to know this was coming. What Jake needs, I cut in, is to grow a spine. What he doesn't need is another enabler making excuses for his failures. Melanie's face hardened. At least he tries. All you do is judge him from your corporate ivory tower while he what? Burns through our savings? Takes out loans we can't afford? Tell me, Melanie, how many of his sure thing investments have you backed? She shifted uncomfortably. That's different. I believe in his vision. His vision? I laughed, the sound harsh even to my own ears. You mean like the cryptocurrency mining operation that nearly burned down our garage? Or maybe the artisanal pickle business that lasted exactly 2 weeks? You never supported him properly, she snapped. If you just what? Keep working 60-hour weeks so he can chase pipe dreams with mommy's approval? I'm done being the family ATM. Melanie stood, smoothing her designer dress. Mom was right about you. You never deserved Jake. Funny, I was just thinking the same thing about him. I moved to open the door. Oh, and Melanie? That Cartier bracelet you're wearing? The one Jake gave you for your birthday? I paid for that too. She flushed, her hand automatically covering the bracelet. He said a lot of things. Now get out. After she left, I sat down at the small desk and opened my laptop. The cursor blinked accusingly as I logged into our joint accounts again. That's when I noticed something odd. A series of regular transfers to an account I didn't recognize, starting exactly 2 months after our wedding. My fingers flew across the keyboard as I dug deeper. Each transfer was labeled business investment, but the receiving account. I felt my stomach drop as I recognized Linda's bank. The amounts weren't huge, but over 8 years, they added up to nearly 6 figures. My phone buzzed again. This time it was Linda. I hope you're proud of yourself. Jake's devastated. Emily keeps asking where her Aunt Ruby is. If you had any decency, you'd sign those papers quietly and leave us in peace. I stared at the message, then back at the screen showing the transfer history. A cold clarity settled over me. They thought they had me cornered, humiliated, defeated. They expected me to slink away, sign their papers, vanish from their lives. Instead, I opened a new document and started typing. Every transaction, every failed business venture, every manipulative moment, I documented it all. Linda wanted peace. She was about to learn that peace came at a price, and I wasn't the one who would be paying it. The truth was a weapon, and I finally knew exactly where to aim it. The credit alert pinged on my phone while I was in a meeting with the company's board. My hands went numb as I stared at the notification. A loan approval for $50,000. A loan I never applied for. I excused myself, ignoring the concerned looks from my colleagues. In the hallway, I called the bank, my voice steady despite the rage building in my chest. Yes, Mrs. Harrison, the loan was approved this morning. Your husband provided all the necessary documentation, including your power of attorney. Power of attorney. The words hit me like a physical blow. I remembered signing something last year, Jake insisting it was just a formality for his new business venture. It'll make things easier, he'd said, flashing that boyish smile that once made my heart flutter. My office phone was blinking when I returned, 3 messages from Linda. I deleted them without listening and opened my email instead. There it was, buried in my spam folder, a confirmation for a business registration. Harrison Family Ventures, LLC. Today's date. My name listed as guarantor. The knock on my office door made me jump. Ruby. It was my assistant, Sarah. There's someone here to see you. Says she's your niece. Emily stood in the reception area, her backpack clutched to her chest. Her eyes were red-rimmed. Aunt Ruby, she whispered. I didn't know where else to go. I ushered her into my office, closing the door on curious stares. Does your mom know you're here? She shook her head. Mom and Grandma are fighting. Uncle Jake came over and they're all yelling about money and papers and… She hiccuped. Mom said you stole from us. But that's not true, is it? Before I could answer, my phone buzzed. Melanie. I sent it to voicemail. Emily, sweetie, how did you get here? I took the bus. I remembered your building from when you showed me where you work. She pulled something from her backpack, a manila folder. I found this in Mom's room. She was crying over it last night. The folder contained bank statements, loan documents, and emails, dozens of them, between Linda, Jake, and Melanie. Planning, calculating, using my income, my credit, my reputation to fund their schemes. You're not the bad guy, Emily said quietly. They are. My phone buzzed again. Jake this time. Where's Emily? Mel's freaking out. Call me. I looked at Emily, then at the documents spread across my desk. 8 years of manipulation laid bare by an 8-year-old's curiosity. Emily, I need to get you home. Please don't make me go back, she whispered. They're different when you're not there. Meaner. Grandma says terrible things, and Mom just agrees with everything, and Uncle Jake. My office phone rang. Linda's name flashed on the caller ID. I made a decision. Sarah, I called out. Cancel my meetings for the rest of the day. I gathered the documents, tucking them into my briefcase. Emily, how do you feel about ice cream? Her face lit up, then fell. But Mom says. Your mom says a lot of things. I took her hand. Let's go make some new rules. In the elevator, I texted Jake. Emily's safe. With me. Don't worry. I'll document everything carefully. Just like you all did. The responses came rapid fire. Threats from Melanie. Guilt trips from Jake. Linda's message was just one line. You've gone too far. I looked at Emily, who was humming softly, her small hand still in mine. No, Linda. You all went too far. And now you're going to learn what happens when you push someone past their breaking point. Aunt Ruby. Emily's voice was small. Are you going to make them stop? I squeezed her hand. Yes, sweetheart. I'm going to make them stop. And I knew exactly where to begin. The folder in my briefcase wasn't just evidence of their betrayal. It was ammunition. They thought they were destroying me. Instead, they'd handed me everything I needed to tear their carefully constructed facade apart. Starting now. The police station's fluorescent lights cast harsh shadows as I sat across from Detective Morris. Emily's folder spread between us. My hands wouldn't stop shaking, but my voice remained steady. Identity theft, fraud, unauthorized loans. Morris flipped through the documents. This is serious, Mrs. Harrison. But are you sure you want to pursue this? It's your husband we're talking about. Ex-husband, I corrected. And yes, I'm sure. My phone vibrated. Another message from Linda. You're making a terrible mistake. Think about Emily. That's exactly what I was doing. The detective's office door opened. Sarah, my assistant, rushed in, clutching her tablet. Ruby, you need to see this. She turned the screen toward me. Our company's internal homepage displayed a lengthy email from Jake to the entire board of directors. My stomach lurched as I read. Accusations of embezzlement, fabricated evidence of me stealing company funds, carefully doctored screenshots of transactions I'd never made. They're calling an emergency board meeting, Sarah whispered. Tomorrow morning. Detective Morris leaned forward. This complicates things. My laugh sounded hollow, even to my own ears. You think. A knock on the door made us all turn. Melanie stood there, mascara streaked down her face. Ruby, please. Mom's taken Emily. The world tilted sideways. What? She says she's protecting her from all of us. She won't tell me where they're going. Melanie's voice cracked. I didn't know. I swear I didn't know how far she'd go. Detective Morris was already on the phone, barking orders about an endangered minor. I gripped the edge of the desk, trying to stay upright as Melanie continued. The loans, the business ventures, they weren't Jake's idea. Mom's been planning this for years. She wanted to ruin you, make you look unstable. But now Emily's gone and I can't. My phone lit up with a text from an unknown number. A photo of Emily, sleeping in what looked like a car seat. Below it, 2 words, choose wisely. Mrs. Harrison, Detective Morris said, we need to move quickly. But if we pursue these charges, your mother-in-law could retaliate with her own accusations. Given the email to your board. She's counting on that, I said, the pieces finally clicking into place. She thinks I'll back down to save my career. That I'll let them write me off as the unstable, greedy wife who tried to destroy the family. Sarah touched my arm. Ruby, the board meeting. Can wait. I stood up, gathering the documents. Detective, I want to file those charges. All of them. And I want a restraining order against Linda Harrison. Ruby, please, Melanie begged. If you do this, if I don't, Emily grows up thinking this is normal. That it's okay for family to manipulate and destroy each other. I turned to her. You can help us find her, or you can leave. Choose wisely. Melanie's face crumpled. She pulled out her phone, hands trembling. Mom has a lake house. It's not in her name, it's under a shell company. Emily and I spent last summer there. Detective Morris was already moving, coordinating with other officers. I watched them spring into action, feeling strangely calm. The career I'd built, my reputation, my future, all of it hung by a thread. But for the first time since this nightmare began, I knew exactly what I was fighting for. My phone buzzed one last time. Jake, whatever you're planning, don't. You'll lose everything. I typed back 3 words. I already have. Then I blocked his number and turned to Detective Morris. What do you need me to do? The detective smiled grimly. Tell me everything. From the beginning. So I did. Because some things were worth losing everything for. And some battles needed to be fought, no matter the cost. Behind me, Melanie sank into a chair, her face in her hands. Ahead, the detectives' team mobilized to find Emily. And somewhere between justice and revenge, I finally found my line in the sand. Linda wanted a war. She was about to get one. The lake house loomed before us, dark and silent in the pre-dawn light. Detective Morris's team moved into position while I sat in the unmarked car, my heart hammering against my ribs. Melanie fidgeted beside me, her fingers twisting a tissue into shreds. Mom always comes here when she's upset, she whispered. Ever since Dad. Since what? Since he tried to leave her. She made sure he lost everything first. A crackle of static from the police radio made us both jump. Movement inside. East window. I pressed my forehead against the cool glass, watching shadows shift behind curtains. Somewhere in there was Emily, caught in Linda's web of control and manipulation, just like her mother had been, just like Jake. The radio crackled again. Subject is moving toward the back door with the child. Now, Morris ordered. Everything exploded into motion. Officers emerged from the shadows, converging on the house. But before they reached the door, Linda stepped onto the back deck. Emily clutched against her chest. Stay back, she called out, her voice carrying across the yard. I'm not letting you take her. I reached for the car door, but Morris's hand shot out. Wait, Ruby. Linda spotted me in the car. Come out here. Face me yourself instead of hiding behind the police. Melanie grabbed my arm. Don't. You don't know what she's capable of. I know exactly what she's capable of. I shook off her grip and stepped out of the car. Linda's laugh carried across the space between us. Finally showing some backbone? Too late, dear. The board's already seen the evidence against you. Your career is over. Jake's filing criminal charges. You've lost everything. Emily, I called out, ignoring Linda. Are you okay, sweetheart? The little girl nodded, her eyes wide with fear. She's fine, Linda snapped. Better than she'd be with a thief for an aunt. Did you really think I wouldn't have proof of your embezzlement? That I wouldn't protect my family from you? I took another step forward. Like you protected them from your husband? Linda's face went white. Behind me, Melanie made a choked sound. Melanie told me everything, Linda. About the lake house. About what you did to her father. How many others have you destroyed to maintain control? You don't know anything, Linda hissed. but her grip on Emily loosened slightly. I kept walking, each step measured, deliberate. I know about the offshore accounts, the shell companies, the pattern of destruction that follows anyone who challenges you. I have proof of all of it. You're bluffing, am I? Check your phone. She shifted Emily to one arm, pulling out her phone. I watched her face change as she saw the email I'd sent minutes ago. Documents, bank records, testimonies from her past victims. All copied to the board, the police, and every major news outlet in the city. You wouldn't, she whispered. You taught me well, Linda. Sometimes you have to burn everything down to build something new. Emily suddenly twisted free, running toward me. I caught her as Linda lunged forward, but the police were already moving. In seconds, they had her surrounded. You'll regret this, Linda snarled as they led her away. All of you will. I held Emily close, feeling her trembling. Melanie approached slowly, tears streaming down her face. I'm sorry, she whispered. I should have stopped her years ago. Mom. Emily's small voice cut through the chaos. Are we safe now? I looked at the lake house, at Linda being placed in a police car, at the life I'd just burned to the ground. The sky was lightning, dawn breaking over the water. Yes, I said, and for the first time in years, I believed it. We're safe. My phone buzzed. Jake, probably learning what had happened. I declined the call. Whatever came next, whatever price I had to pay, some things were worth losing everything for. The sun rose over the lake, painting the world in shades of gold and promise. The boardroom felt like a tomb, 15 faces staring down at me from the elevated platform. My presentation materials, proof of Linda's schemes, Jake's fraud, the years of manipulation, sat untouched before them. Chairman Roberts hadn't even opened the folder. Mrs. Harrison, he said, these allegations against your mother-in-law are troubling. They're not allegations. They're facts. Facts that conveniently emerged after suspicious transfers were detected from company accounts under your supervision. The projector hummed to life, displaying transaction records. My stomach dropped as I recognized the pattern. Perfectly crafted forgeries showing years of systematic theft. Linda's work, wearing my digital fingerprints. I can explain. Mrs. Harrison, Roberts cut in, given the severity of these discoveries and your recent emotional instability, the board has decided to suspend you pending investigation. Security waited by the door. My access badge would be deactivated before I reached the lobby. 15 years of climbing the corporate ladder, destroyed in 15 minutes. My phone vibrated. Jake's lawyer. Criminal charges filed. Court date set. Recommend immediate settlement. I walked out with my head high, past Sarah's tearful face, past the whispers and stares. In the elevator, another message pinged. Melanie. They're releasing Mom on bail. Emily's scared. Please help. The doors opened to reveal Jake waiting in the lobby, looking haunted. Ruby, we need to talk. Now you want to talk? After filing criminal charges. I didn't. Mom's lawyer filed them. I tried to stop it, but you're still too weak to stand up to her. I moved past him, but he caught my arm. She's destroying everything, he whispered. The business loans, the fraud charges, she set us both up. I found proof, but she threatened Emily if I came forward. I jerked away. Convenient timing, Jake. Where was this revelation when she was pouring tea over my head? Ruby, please. I know I messed up, but Emily, don't. My voice cracked. Don't use that child as a shield for your cowardice. Outside, reporters waited. Linda's email to the media had done its work. The successful executive's spectacular fall from grace, complete with accusations of theft and family betrayal. Cameras flashed as I pushed through them. My phone buzzed again. Detective Morris, evidence compromised. Internal Affairs investigation launched. Can't help further. Of course. Linda's influence reached far. I made it to my car before the tears came. Everything I'd built, everything I'd fought for gone. Linda had outmaneuvered me at every turn, using my own weapons against me. Even my attempt to expose her had played into her hands. A tap on my window made me jump. Emily stood there, tears streaming down her face. Behind her, Melanie hovered uncertainly. Grandma's coming home. Emily sobbed as I opened the door. She says we're all going to live together now. Be a proper family. She says you're sick and need help. Emily, Melanie called. We should go. No. Emily clung to me. Aunt Ruby's not sick. Grandma's the one who hurts people. I saw the papers, the ones she made Uncle Jake sign. I heard her on the phone about the fake money stuff. Melanie went pale. Emily, what papers? In Grandma's special room. The one we're not supposed to talk about. I looked at Melanie, seeing the same realization dawn in her eyes. Linda's perfect plan had one flaw. She'd forgotten about the one person she thought didn't matter. The child who saw everything. Emily, I said carefully, would you be brave enough to tell Detective Morris about those papers? She nodded, squeezing my hand. My phone buzzed one last time. Linda, it's over, Ruby. You've lost. I looked at Emily's determined face, at Melanie's dawning courage, at the truth finally emerging from the shadows. Maybe I had lost everything. But sometimes, losing everything was just the beginning. No, Linda, I whispered. It's just starting. Linda's special room looked exactly as Emily had described, a pristine home office with walls of filing cabinets. Detective Morris and his team moved methodically through the space while Linda sat rigid in her chair, her perfect posture finally cracking. This is harassment, she spat. You have no right. Actually, Morris held up the warrant. We do. Emily's testimony was quite specific about which cabinet contained the forged documents. I leaned against the doorframe, watching Linda's face. The same face that had smiled while dumping tea on me, now twisted with barely contained rage. You're using a child, she hissed at me. My own granddaughter. No, Linda. You used her. Just like you used Jake, Melanie, and everyone else. The detective's voice cut through our tension, found it. Linda lunged for the drawer, but two officers held her back. Morris pulled out a thick folder, original loan documents, banking records, emails outlining her entire scheme. Everything Emily had described. It's over, Mom. Jake stood in the doorway, Melanie beside him. Both looked shell-shocked as Morris read out document after document. You ungrateful children, Linda's voice trembled. Everything I did was for this family. To keep us together. To make us strong. You made us weak. Melanie stepped forward. You made us afraid. Of you, a failure of everything. Afraid. Linda laughed, high and brittle. I made you successful. Ask your father how well he did after he left. Ask anyone who's crossed me. Ask Emily. I cut in. What were you teaching her, Linda? That love means control? That family means fear. She turned on me, mask finally shattering. You were nothing before this family. A nobody from nowhere who thought she could take my son, my legacy. Your legacy? Jake's voice cracked. Look around, Mom. Look what you've built. Lies. Fraud. Your own granddaughter testified against you because she was more afraid of your love than your anger. Speaking of testimony, Morris interrupted. Mrs. Harrison, we found evidence of extensive financial fraud, identity theft, and criminal conspiracy. You'll need to come with us. Linda's eyes darted around the room, finding no allies. You can't prove. Actually, I pulled out my phone. We can. Emily wasn't the only one gathering evidence. Remember that charity foundation you used to launder money? Their board just voted to cooperate with the investigation. Fully. The color drained from her face. You learned from the best. I stepped closer. You taught me well, Linda. About power. About consequences. About family. She lunged at me suddenly, years of careful control exploding into rage. But before the officers could react, Melanie caught her mother's arm. Stop. Melanie's voice was quiet but firm. Just stop. Linda stared at her daughter's hand, then at Jake's resolute face, then finally at me. Something crumbled behind her eyes. You've destroyed everything, she whispered. No, I replied. You did that yourself. I just showed them the truth. As the officers led her away, Jake touched my arm. Ruby, don't. I stepped back. This isn't forgiveness, Jake. This is justice. There's a difference. What happens now? Melanie asked, staring at the empty doorway where her mother had disappeared. Emily's voice answered from the hallway. We get better. We all turned. She stood there, small but straight-backed, looking so much stronger than any of us. We get better, she repeated. Right, Aunt Ruby? I looked at this broken family. Jake's shame, Melanie's grief, Emily's hope. The revenge I'd wanted had transformed into something else. Something that felt less like victory and more like liberation. Yes, I said, taking Emily's hand. We get better. Behind us, Linda's perfect room lay in ruins, her careful facade stripped away. But in that destruction, I saw something new emerging. Something real. Sometimes revenge isn't about destroying your enemies. Sometimes it's about destroying the lies they built their power on. And sometimes that's enough. The courtroom emptied slowly, murmurs echoing off marble walls as Linda was led away in handcuffs. I remained seated, watching Emily draw patterns on the wooden bench with her finger. 7 to 10 years, she said thoughtfully. That's like forever. Not forever, I replied. Just long enough. Melanie approached, clutching her purse like a shield. The house sold. Above asking price. She handed me an envelope. Your share of the proceeds. I know it doesn't make up for. Keep it, I said. Put it in Emily's college fund. The ghost of a smile crossed her face. You're still looking out for us, even after everything. Not for us, Emily corrected. For me. Because I told the truth. Jake lingered by the courtroom doors, uncertain. He testified against his mother, finally finding his voice after years of silence. Too late for us, but maybe not too late for himself. My phone buzzed, a message from the board. After Linda's conviction, they launched an internal investigation that cleared my name. They wanted me back with a promotion and a public apology. I deleted the message without responding. You're not going back, are you? Emily asked, watching my face. No. Some places you can't go back to. Sometimes you have to build something new. Like my art studio. She pulled a folded paper from her pocket, a business plan written in crayon, complete with stick figure drawings. Mom says I'm too young, but I've been saving my allowance. Melanie sighed. Emily. Actually, I interrupted. I'd like to hear this pitch. Emily's face lit up. She launched into her presentation, describing her vision for an after-school art program for kids. No pressure, no competition, just creation. A safe space to express themselves. And see, she pointed to a wobbly organizational chart. You could help run it, Aunt Ruby. You're good at business stuff and Mom's good at art, and we could. She stopped, uncertain. Unless you don't want to be around us anymore. The question hung in the air, heavy with the weight of everything that had happened. I looked at Melanie's hopeful expression, at Jake's distant guilt, at Emily's simple wisdom. You know what Linda never understood? I said finally. The difference between controlling people and supporting them. Between fear and love. Emily nodded solemnly, like how she said she was protecting us, but really she was just scared of losing us. Exactly. I picked up her business plan. So maybe it's time to build something different. Something real. Is that a yes? Her eyes sparkled. It's a let's talk about it. Over ice cream. Can Mom come? I met Melanie's gaze. If she wants to. Jake stepped forward. Ruby, not you, Jake. I kept my voice gentle but firm. Some bridges stay burned. But I hope you build better ones. He nodded, understanding finally settling into his features. As he left, Emily slipped her hand into mine. Grandma said revenge would make you ugly inside, she whispered. But it didn't. It made you stronger. Made all of us stronger. I thought about Linda's face as the verdict was read, about the years of manipulation unraveled by a child's truth, about the difference between revenge and justice, between destruction and transformation. Ready to go? I asked. Emily nodded, then paused. Can we get chocolate ice cream? Any flavor you want. As we left the courthouse, I felt the weight of the past 8 years lifting. Linda's perfect family had shattered, but from its ruins, something authentic was emerging. Not perfect, not unmarked, but real. Sometimes the best revenge isn't about getting even. Sometimes it's about getting free. And sometimes, freedom tastes like chocolate ice cream on a Tuesday afternoon, planning a future that nobody else gets to control.
Landon, you need to see this. Now. Mara's panicked voice pierced the silence of my morning routine. I froze, my spoonful of Cheerios hovering halfway between the bowl and my mouth. Mara was my neighbor, and while we were friendly, her barging unannounced into my home was unusual, to say the least. I sprang up from the kitchen island, my unease growing. "Mara, what's going on?" She gestured wildly. "It's Landon. I just went over to borrow some sugar, and he's on the floor and—" I didn't wait for her to finish. I shoved past her and raced up the stairs, taking them two at a time. My mind reeled. Landon prone on the floor. Why was Mara even over here so early? Dread pooled in my stomach as terrifying possibilities flooded my thoughts. I skidded into our bedroom, my breath catching at the sight of my husband sprawled motionless on the carpet. "Landon." Kneeling, I gripped his shoulders, giving him a shake, eliciting only a faint moan. Relief washed over me. At least he was alive. I whipped around to face Mara, who hovered nervously in the doorway. "Did you call 911? She shook her head mutely. "Well, call them," I snapped, "and get me a cold cloth for his forehead." I turned my attention back to Landon, tapping his face gently. "Landon, can you hear me? Everything is going to be okay." Everything was definitely not okay. My mind reeled as I tried assessing what happened. Landon had seemed perfectly normal when he kissed me goodbye not even an hour earlier. And now here he was, unconscious. I racked my brain, trying to remember if he'd complained of any symptoms lately. He'd seemed a little more tired and distracted the past few weeks, but I'd chalked it up to his demanding work schedule. Guilt twisted my insides. Had I missed something crucial? I smoothed Landon's hair back from his clammy forehead, willing him to open his eyes, to say something. In the distance, I heard the wail of an approaching siren. Thank God the paramedics were almost here. Mara rushed back in with a wet towel, her face pinched with worry. As I laid the cool cloth on Landon's head, a tiny flare of suspicion caught in my mind. How had Mara even found Landon? She said she came over to borrow sugar, but I knew for a fact we were out. I made a mental note to question her more later. The paramedics arriving halted that train of thought. I moved back to let them work, firing off answers to their rapid queries. No serious prior medical issues. No complaints of pain recently. Yes, he seems overworked and exhausted. I stared helplessly as they loaded Landon's limp form onto a stretcher. One EMT turned to me, her expression kind but serious. "We're taking him to County Memorial. It seems he possibly had a minor heart episode or stroke. We won't know more until we run some tests." I swallowed hard, wrapping my arms around myself against the chill running through me that had nothing to do with the temperature. I felt Mara come up beside me. "Bryn, I'm so sorry," she said softly. "I know this is beyond shocking. Do you want me to call anyone for you?" I shook my head, taking a deep breath to steady my nerves. "No, I need to make those calls myself, starting with his office." I attempted a grateful look. "But thank you for finding him. If you hadn't come over—" I let the sentence trail off, an icy shiver run down my spine at the implication. She put a consoling hand on my shoulder. "Of course, let me know if you need anything at all." I offered a weak smile before going to make the necessary calls, questions about Mara still needling my brain. But first, I needed to get to the hospital and pray my husband of 15 years would be okay. Sitting in the too-bright hospital room, I watched Landon sleep. The steady beep of the heart monitor the only sound breaking the heavy silence. He looked diminished somehow, lying there pale against the starched sheets, a tangle of wires and tubes connecting him to various machines. The doctors said he'd had a minor heart attack, likely brought on by stress and lack of self-care. He was lucky to be alive and should make a full recovery, but it would be a long road ahead. My relief at his prognosis was tempered by anger that he had let himself get to this point. And then there was the question of Mara and her suspicious timing in supposedly finding him. My head throbbed trying to make sense of it all. A soft rap at the door pulled me from my thoughts. I looked up to see Mara peeking her head in, a vase of flowers in her hands. "Hey, I didn't want to disturb you, but I wanted to drop these off for Landon." I forced a polite smile. "You're too kind. More flowers couldn't hurt in this dreary place." I gestured for her to place the arrangement on the windowsill before an awkward beat passed between us. Clearing my throat, I broke the silence first. "So, the doctors seem confident he'll recover in a few weeks." Mara's face flooded with relief as she settled into the chair next to me. "Oh, thank goodness. I've just been so worried, replaying it all in my mind. I mean, what if I hadn't randomly decided I needed to borrow sugar at that exact moment? It doesn't bear thinking about." She trailed off, absent-mindedly fidgeting with the handle of her purse. I stiffened, that nagging flare of doubt rekindled by her words. Our houses shared a backyard fence. She wouldn't have been able to see Landon collapse through a window or door. The only logical way she could have happened upon the scene was if she was already inside our home. I studied her carefully, noticing the way she avoided eye contact, focusing intently on her hands. Was it guilt I detected in her body language, or simple distress over the situation? Mara stood abruptly, breaking me from my scrutinizing reverie. "Well, I should get out of your hair, let you have some time alone with him." She stepped over to give my shoulder a brief, awkward pat. "Call if you need anything, okay?" I walked her to the door, my suspicions solidifying into resolve. As unsettled as I felt over the many unanswered questions, I knew now wasn't the time to confront her, not while Landon's condition remained uncertain. But the moment he was cleared to come home safely, I would get to the bottom of Mara's bizarre behavior. I was through with politely ignoring the signs something wasn't right. Over the next few days, I split my time between the hospital and home, maintaining an exhausting vigil over Landon's recovery. My parents flew in from Florida to offer their support, giving me both moral support and a break from the endless hospital stays. Landon's progress was slow but steady, until late one week when his doctor finally gave clearance for him to finish recuperating at home. My parents departed back south, with firm instructions for me to call if I needed anything else. The morning after I got Landon settled in at home, I steeled myself and marched over to Mara's place, determined to get answers. When she opened the door, surprise flashed across her face. "Bryn, I didn't know you were stopping by." I folded my arms across my chest, fixing her with an even look. "We need to talk. Now." Mara paled slightly but stepped back, gesturing for me to enter. I crossed the threshold, setting the stage for a long overdue confrontation. I sat ramrod straight on Mara's plush white couch, clutching my cell phone like a lifeline. She settled into the armchair adjacent, her eyes wary. "Would you like something to drink?" she asked with forced brightness. I shook my head curtly. "No, I'm here for answers." Mara smoothed her hair back, letting out a nervous titter. "Answers? About what?" My eyes narrowed, honing in on her discomfort. "Let's start with how exactly you happened to find my husband unconscious. Want to run that by me again?" Mara looked down, picking at a thread on her jeans. "Well, like I told you, I came over to borrow something. I noticed the front door was ajar, which was unusual, so I went inside to check if everything was okay. That's when I found Landon passed out." I let out a harsh scoff. "That's quite the revised history, Mara, because when you first told me about it at the house, you distinctly said you came over for sugar." I leaned forward. "We both know I didn't have any sugar for you to borrow. So what's the real story?" Her eyes flashed with what looked like anger before being quickly replaced with faux confusion. "I'm not sure what you're implying, Bryn," she said carefully. "It was a traumatic morning. I must have misremembered the exact details." We sat in tense silence, both refusing to break eye contact first. I decided to switch tactics. "You mentioned the other day at the hospital how lucky it was you happened to randomly decide to come over when you did, but considering the state of my front door, it's pretty clear the timing wasn't just coincidence. Was it, Mara?" Her mouth opened and closed soundlessly, cheeks reddening. I pressed on, urgency creeping into my voice. "He's my husband. I deserve the truth. What is going on between you two?" Abruptly, Mara stood. "I think you should leave now." Her voice was cold, all pretense vanishing. I followed suit, refusing to be deterred. "Not until you start being honest. I'm no fool. I know something is happening behind my back." My voice broke on the last word. Mara stepped closer, rage twisting her features. "Careful, Bryn," she hissed. "You have no idea what you're starting by making wild accusations. Some things are better left alone." I reeled back. Was that a threat? Before I could respond, Mara yanked open the front door. "I believe it's time for you to go," she said icily. Temporarily speechless, I allowed myself to be herded outside. Mara's ominous words echoed in my ears as she slammed the door in my face. I stood frozen on the steps for several long beats, shaking with a melange of emotions, confusion, anger, hurt. It was painfully clear Mara was tangled up with Landon in some capacity. Her hostile reaction had only amplified my worst fears. By the time I got back home, steely determination had eclipsed the stunned hurt I initially felt. I knew now I couldn't rely on either Mara or Landon to give me the whole truth willingly about whatever was between them. Fortunately, I still had one ace up my sleeve, someone who could help me expose the rot at the core of my marriage, a private investigator. After witnessing Mara's volatile response up close, I no longer cared if drastic measures were required. One way or another, I was getting the proof I needed to force Mara and Landon's deceit into the harsh light. I opened my laptop, hands steady as I searched for the best investigator money could buy. I drummed my fingers on my desk, hitting refresh on my email for the 10th time in as many minutes. I was awaiting the preliminary report from Mick Walsh, the private investigator I hired a week prior, anxious to see if he uncovered any substantial evidence of Landon's duplicity. My knee bounced with nervous energy as I once again scanned through my inbox. Finally, a new message appeared at the top, Mick's name flashing in bold. Taking a deep breath to steel my nerves, I clicked it open. My eyes raced across the page, hands beginning to tremble halfway through digesting the attached photos and Mick's analysis. It was worse than I thought. Apparently, Landon and Mara's trysts had started over 6 months ago. My mind reeled as I examined photo after photo of them ducking into seedy motels, kissing on park benches, and holding hands during intimate restaurant meals. Acid roiled in my stomach at the realization that Landon hadn't just cheated, he was living a completely separate life with Mara behind my back. I shoved my chair back from the desk, bile rising in my throat. I barely made it to the bathroom before I lost the meager contents of my stomach. Gripping the toilet seat until my knuckles turned white, guttural sobs racked through me. Through the echoing anguish in my ears, one thought broke through the torrential hurt. I wanted revenge. No, I corrected myself. I deserved revenge. Splashing icy water on my face, I regarded my reflection in the mirror. The shell shock was gone, replaced by icy determination. I knew then I wouldn't be satisfied with simply confronting Landon over his betrayal. I wanted consequences. Steep, life-altering consequences not just for him, but for Mara too. I wanted them humiliated, ostracized from their social circles and careers. Proof of their lies made public for all to see. The Altoids website said revenge was best served cold. Well, Mara and Landon were about to experience my icy vengeance firsthand. My mind whirled as I began meticulously plotting each step, moving into a calculated chess match I intended to win at all costs. First, I texted Mara from Landon's phone, requesting she come over the next day to talk. I knew she wouldn't be able to resist the bait. Next, I drafted an email to our entire neighborhood watch group, emphasizing that Mara and my husband had urgent news to share with all at the community park tomorrow evening. The neighbors would be surprised, but they were sure to spread the word like wildfire. Finally, I scheduled a morning meeting with my lawyer. While I didn't plan on immediately filing divorce papers, I wanted my options mapped out ahead of time before dropping the bomb on Landon. Satisfied I had set all the necessary groundwork, I poured myself a large glass of wine and retreated to the guest bedroom. I refused to sleep another night in the bed Landon had callously defiled. Swirling the crimson liquid, I allowed myself a small smile. Let Mara and Landon enjoy their last evening together before their world imploded. Tomorrow I was dragging their lies into the disinfecting sunlight for everyone to see. For the first time in weeks, I slept deeply, energized by the promise of redemption. I awoke well before dawn, adrenaline already thrumming through my veins. Today was the day I would finally expose Landon and Mara's betrayal after weeks of secrecy and lies. I dressed methodically, donning an outfit that presented strength and confidence. I needed to project control and power when I confronted them. In the muted early morning light, I found myself gazing around the home Landon and I had shared for over a decade, seeing it with new eyes. I trailed my fingers over the wedding photo on the fireplace mantel, two smiling strangers frozen in time, blissfully unaware of the future wreckage of their vows. Bile rose in my throat as I now noticed other traces of Mara peppered throughout the house. The throw pillow she gifted us last Christmas, the botanical calendar from her small business posted in the kitchen. Proof she had seamlessly infiltrated the inner sanctum of my home and marriage for months without my knowledge. Well, it ended today. I finished my coffee, relieved to hear Landon stirring upstairs, readying himself for the ambush ahead. The doorbell rang right on schedule at 9 a.m. sharp. I opened it to find Mara on the doorstep, concern etched on her face that I knew now was just a facade. "Bryn, is everything okay?" Landon's text had me worried. She tried peering around me. "Is he here?" I stepped aside in cold silence, allowing her entry as I sent the pre-written text instructing the neighborhood watch members to gather at the park at noon. I wanted an audience for the final act. Mara perched awkwardly on the couch while I informed Landon he had a visitor. He came trotting eagerly down the stairs, but pulled up short at the sight of me standing rigidly behind a confused-looking Mara. I broke the tension, keeping my voice neutral and calm. "Well, isn't this cozy? My husband and his mistress chatting over morning coffee." Mara leapt up as Landon spluttered. "Bryn, it's not what you think." His eyes were wide with panic. I held up a hand. "Save it. I know everything, have proof of it all, photos, dates, the whole sordid timeline, so you can drop the wounded confusion act." "You crazy bitch," Mara seethed, posture taut like a snake about to strike. "I told you to leave this alone. Now you've ruined everything." I let out a sharp, brittle laugh. "Oh, I've ruined everything? That's rich, coming from the backstabbing harlot sleeping with my husband." Mara lunged forward, but I didn't flinch. "Listen very carefully. You both have 5 minutes to get out of my sight, because in less than an hour you're going to admit publicly everything you've done." I smiled coldly. "Don't worry, I've invited all the neighbors over already." Ignoring their spluttering protests, I turned on my heel and strode away, pausing at the doorway. I'd use this time wisely to start coming up with one hell of an apology. I left them standing slack-jawed amidst the rubble of their lies. Soon, everyone would know the truth. Justice was at hand. The sunny afternoon air felt sharp and brittle against my skin as I approached the neighborhood park. I spotted many familiar faces milling about, checking phones and murmuring with confusion about the urgent summons. Good, word had spread quickly. I climbed atop the picnic table at the front, clearing my throat loudly. "Thank you all for coming on short notice. I know you're wondering what this is about." I paused, pulse thundering in my ears. "I've asked you here because my husband and neighbor have an important announcement regarding their relationship." I stepped back as nervous whispers rippled through the crowd. Right on cue, Mara and Landon rounded the corner, arm in arm. I watched impassively as they took in the scene before them, dozens of pairs of eyes staring, rapt with attention. Landon dropped Mara's arm like she was on fire, taking a half step away from her. "Bryn, what the hell is going on?" he hissed under his breath. Ignoring him, I smiled icily at the gathering. "Go ahead, you two. The floor is yours." Mara looked wildly between the staring faces and me, hatred in her gaze. I met it coolly, arms folded in front of me, refusing to let my smile drop. Her shoulders slumped slightly as the defiance seeped from her frame at seeing the undeniable proof rimming her in on all sides. Her voice came out hoarse when she finally found it. "Fine, Bryn, you win." She wrung her hands, words directed at the ground. "Landon and I have been seeing each other romantically behind Bryn's back for several months now." A collective gasp arose from the crowd. My triumph only grew as Mara glanced again at the crowd's disgusted faces. I raised a brow, prompting her to continue. I knew he was married, but I didn't care, and he pursued me relentlessly until I gave in." At this, Landon made a small strangling sound, but I silenced him with a quelling glare. Mara pressed a hand to her cheek, but forced herself to meet the eyes boring into her. "Our affair has completely betrayed Bryn's trust. I'm ashamed of my behavior." Her voice dropped to a tortured whisper. "I'm so very sorry." The ladies in the group immediately clustered around me, murmuring words of sympathy and support. I accepted their comfort graciously, keeping my gaze fixed on Mara and Landon's slumped forms standing alone amidst the recriminations swirling around them. The consequences were only just beginning for those two. As the afternoon stretched on, Mara's business partner and close friend cornered me, disgust etched on her face. "Bryn, I had no idea about Mara's behavior, but it's completely unacceptable. Consider her business partnership with me dissolved effective immediately." I graciously accepted her heartfelt apology on behalf of Mara's actions. As I watched her walk away to inform Mara, I allowed myself a small, satisfied smile. My plan was working perfectly. Mara and Landon's lies were exposed to everyone they cared about, with professional and social consequences already piling up. The best revenge truly was living well. And I was just getting started. Over the next 2 weeks, I watched with satisfaction as Mara and Landon's world steadily crumbled around them. True to her word, Mara's business partner dropped her. She had to close her fledgling soap company as key clients and corporate sponsors pulled out. Horrified by the social media fallout surrounding her now very public affair. Internet support swelled for me, as people praised my courage in dragging her deceit into the light. And while I fielded calls from sponsors willing to provide aid, Mara remained in a fierce downward spiral. Her formerly glossy social channels were flooded with hate and criticisms decrying her manipulative personality. For Landon, the professional retribution took longer, as many of us clients were tied to lengthy contracts with his firm. But small signs of demise showed: critical online reviews, a slow drop-off of calls for new properties. Then finally, blessedly, 2 of his largest clients sent termination letters, citing his profound personal lapse in moral judgment. I celebrated his misery from my guest room sanctuary, grateful I still had legal right to remain in our shared home through the divorce proceedings. Our relationship grew beyond frigid interactions limited to curt, mechanical conversations regarding household affairs. During one such exchange, Landon clenched his fists at his sides. "Bryn, this is madness. You've taken it too far. Mara and I's jobs," I cut him off coolly. "Landon, you lost the moral high ground when you cheated on your wife for half a year. You're simply experiencing the consequences." Ignoring his outraged spluttering, I continued. "I met with my lawyer and drew up a settlement agreement. You'll receive 30% of assets and forfeit our shared real estate commissions and equity." Landon gaped like a fish struggling for air. "You can't just change our prenup like that," I laughed sharply. "Oh, I most certainly can in cases of adultery with legal proof." I fixed him with a steely gaze. "You're getting off easy. I suggest signing without further argument." Landon looked ready to spontaneously combust for several seconds before slumping in defeat. "You're a vindictive, soulless shrew," he whispered harshly. "You've ruined our futures over an affair." My eyes blazed with cold fire. "You want to lecture me about ruining futures and betrayal? How rich? I'm not the villain here. I just refuse to be your victim either." I shoved the thick envelope toward him. "Sign it or face a uglier, messier legal battle." After a long, seething beat of silence, he bitterly scrawled his name across the document, sealing his financial ruin. As I showed him the door, a profound wave of cathartic relief crashed over me. This painful chapter was finally closed for good. Later that night, as I opened a nice bottle of wine to celebrate a battle hard won, my phone rang with Mara's number flashing on the screen. Against my better judgment, I answered. Her words came out in broken half-sobs. "Why couldn't you just let it go, Bryn? Why did you have to destroy us so completely over one mistake?" I allowed myself one beat of delicious satisfaction, hearing her misery before I hung up without another word. I turned my phone off and raised my glass in a solitary toast to new beginnings. 2 months passed in the blink of an eye. I stood in the entryway of my cozy new condo, hands on my hips as I surveyed the sleek space where I was starting fresh. The divorce was finalized last week, leaving me with complete ownership of this place all my own. Landon got the house, which needed extensive repairs anyway, and I received a sizable settlement after the kids and I sold it. I crossed to the balcony doors, smiling as I gazed out at the pleasing skyline view. It had been an emotionally tumultuous season, but with the hardest parts behind me, I finally allowed myself to relax into the next chapter. The private investigator I hired out of a mad rush to expose the affair had become a close confidant during the messy showdown and aftermath. Over enchiladas one warm evening, Mick made me a money-making offer to spin my story into a series for a local podcast network looking for gripping content. I jumped on it eagerly, not just for the paycheck, but because it proved the best revenge is indeed living well. Today marked the debut episode release featuring my recounting of the betrayal. My producer texted to say the analytics looked promising for solid listenership. I couldn't wait to finally give my side and relinquish the bitterness and pain that clung to me like cobwebs for so long. It was time to shake off the darkness of deception and walk freely into the light again. I spent the afternoon in a flurry of activity preparing to host a small listening gathering that evening in my new condo for the first episode's drop. My doorbell rang promptly at 6 o'clock, and I opened it to find Zoe, my closest girlfriend who stuck firmly by my side as an ally during the whole saga. Her compassionate strength provided a lifeline through many tearful nights. We hugged fiercely before she held me at arm's length, assessing me with a warm smile. "It's so wonderful to see that spark back in your eyes, Bryn. You look stunning as always, but now you're glowing from within again, too." I squeezed her hand, overcome with gratitude, as a few other dear friends arrived to show their support. We settled in the living room, with glasses of wine and snacks to listen. Their gasps and murmurs of outrage in all the right places brought a sense of deep comfort. I wasn't alone in this anymore. As the episode wrapped up with a preview for part 2, my circle of friends erupted into exuberant applause. I dabbed the corners of my eyes, unexpectedly overcome. Zoe stood, raising her glass. "To our amazing, courageous, justice-serving friend, Bryn. Not all heroes wear capes." Everyone echoed her sentiments as we clinked glasses. Zoe enveloped me in another fierce hug as the well wishes continued flowing. "I'm so proud of you for telling this story on your own terms. Now everyone will know the truth and the two dirtbags behind it all." I sighed contentedly, feeling lighter than I had in ages. The party and camaraderie flowed late into the evening before my guests trickled out with last hugs and promises to meet again soon. Alone again in my peaceful sanctuary of a home, I raised my glass in a private toast to living courageously after betrayal, and the joy of taking back my life on my own terms without apology. The long road here was worth every step. "You greedy bastards," I muttered under my breath. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Hidden outside my father's study, I listened in shocked disgust as my mother and brother casually discussed how they would benefit financially from my dad's impending death. "With Marshall gone, we'll finally get our hands on the inheritance," my brother Declan said. "His business is worth millions, but we need to act fast before his conditional will locks us out." "I've waited decades for that old fool to die," my mother Evelyn snapped. "We deserve that money more than anyone." I felt sick with rage. My father had devoted his entire life to building his craft brewery company. He had started from nothing, working tirelessly while selflessly giving back to our community. And now, as he lay terminally ill with lung cancer, his own family schemed to seize his hard-earned legacy. I burst into the study, unable to restrain myself. "You should both be ashamed," I bellowed. "Dad is fighting for his life, and all you care about is money?" Evelyn gasped theatrically. "Ryder, what are you doing, eavesdropping on us?" I ignored her attempt to flip the script. "I heard enough. You plan to manipulate Dad's will and steal his company for your own gain." Declan snickered. "Half-brother, you're too soft for your own good. Stay out of this if you know what's best for you." My hands curled into fists. I had to take a slow breath to contain my fury. We may only share one parent between us, but Declan and I grew up as brothers. This betrayal cut deep. Evelyn chimed in with her usual manipulation. "Sweetheart, we only want what's fair for our family." I cut her off sharply. "Fair? You insult Dad on his deathbed after everything he's done for you." I shook my head in disgust. In that moment, I knew where my loyalties lay. "I'll be visiting Dad in the hospital now," I said coldly. "Do what you want. I'll protect his legacy at all costs." I turned and strode out, determined to put as much distance between myself and those deceitful snakes. My mind raced as I jumped into my old pickup truck. I refused to let them steal everything my father worked for, but I was just one man against their machinations. As I drove to the hospital where Dad lay clinging to life, one thing became crystalline clear. This brewing war between us would only end once justice had been served. My so-called family pinned their greed above all else, but they didn't yet realize one thing. Never underestimate my devotion to the man who raised me. I aimed to honor my father, no matter the cost. The pungent smell of antiseptic filled my nose as I walked through the bustling hospital corridors. The sterile environment only amplified the gravity of why I was here, to see my dad, Marshall, as he endured the final agonizing stages of lung cancer. I stepped into his room, and the sight of his gaunt, weakened frame pierced my heart. Yet when he saw me, his face still lit up. "Ryder, my boy, so good of you to visit your old man," he rasped, his voice barely a whisper. I grasped his bony hand, holding back tears. "Hey, Dad," I said, managing a sad smile. "How are you feeling today?" He dismissed my question with a wave. "Ah, still kicking, but enough about me. Tell me what's new with you." Even now, he thought of everyone but himself. I swallowed hard. "I got a new contract to design some beer labels for a client in Austin. Should be a fun campaign." "Glad to hear the graphic design business is booming." Dad's smile radiated pride. "You've done so well for yourself, son. I always knew you were destined for great things." I felt a pang in my chest, recalling his unwavering support when I decided to leave college and chart my own path as an entrepreneur. He never stopped believing in me, which made what I had overheard earlier even more difficult. As if reading my thoughts, Dad squeezed my hand. "Ryder, promise me something. No matter what happens, stay true to yourself. Don't let money or other people change who you are." My throat tightened with emotion. After a pause, I met his earnest gaze. "Of course, Dad, I promise." He nodded, seeming to relax back into his pillow. Just then, the door swung open, admitting my mother and Declan. I stiffened. "Oh, Marshall, we've been so worried." Evelyn gushed dramatically, embracing Dad. Behind her fake smile, I sensed cold calculation. Declan hung back, feigning concern. "We came as soon as we heard the news. How bad is it?" I gritted my teeth. "Did they have no shame?" Dad patted Evelyn's hand. "It's terminal, I'm afraid, but I've made my peace with it." His eyes flashed defiantly. "My affairs are all in order." Declan and Evelyn exchanged a subtle, frustrated look. My hands curled into fists. They were like vultures, impatiently waiting to pick my father's bones clean. I stood abruptly. "I should get going. Feel better, Dad." As I left, I paused beside Declan. Through clenched teeth, I muttered, "This isn't over. I meant what I said." He smirked. "Still clinging to those foolish principles, brother? When will you open your eyes and seize the opportunity before you?" My blood boiled at his sneering words. Without replying, I stormed out before I did something I'd regret. Driving home, Dad's earnest words echoed in my mind. No matter how hard Evelyn and Declan tried to destroy his legacy, I refused to compromise who I was. Dad built his brewery empire from the ground up, with unfailing integrity. Now it was up to me to safeguard everything he worked for from those deceitful jackals. Failure was not an option. I owed that much to the man I loved as a father. Resolve stealing within me, I drove onward through the gathering dusk. The fight for my dad's legacy had only just begun. I strode through the hospital's sliding doors, a bouquet of daisies in hand, Dad's favorite. The nurses at the front desk waved in somber recognition. After so many visits these past few agonizing weeks, I knew this place like a second home now. "How is he today?" I asked Helen, an older nurse who cared for Dad daily. She smiled gently. "He pushed through the night, but he's fading fast. Spend all the time you can with him." I nodded, throat tightening. "Thank you. For everything." She squeezed my arm in quiet empathy before I continued down the hall. Step by step, I steeled myself for what I knew would be one of the last times I'd speak to my father. I paused outside his room, taking a deep breath. When I entered, the sight of him knocked the wind out of me. His shrunken frame barely made a contour under the stark white sheets. His breathing sounded painfully labored. Machines beeped and whirred, temporary guardians against the inevitable. Dad slowly turned to me, his eyes lighting up when they met mine. "Ryder," he rasped, raising a trembling hand. I rushed forward, grasping it firmly as I sat beside him. "Hey, Dad," I said gently. "I brought you something." I raised the daisies, conjuring a faint smile to my lips. He inhaled their sweet scent. "My favorite. You always had a knack for knowing just what I needed." I squeezed his hand, unable to speak past the emotion clogging my throat. We sat in poignant silence for several moments. Despite the whirs and beeps punctuating the air, an aura of profound peace surrounded us. All that mattered was simply being present, side by side. After a while, Dad met my gaze. "Ryder, promise me you'll look after the brewery. My employees depend on it." I nodded firmly. "Of course. I swear I'll protect your legacy, Dad." He studied me with sudden intensity. "No matter who tries to wrest it from you, stand resolute. Blood means far less than integrity and grit." I swallowed hard. So he did know of Evelyn and Declan's vile schemes. "I understand," I said quietly. "And I meant what I said. I won't let them win." Dad relaxed back with a look of satisfaction. We lapsed into easy conversation about happier memories over the years. For a beautiful, bittersweet interval, we indulged in nostalgia, smiles and laughter punctuating the poignant mood. Too soon, Dad grew drained. His replies came slower, his eyes heavier. I gave his hand one last squeeze and stood. "Get some rest. I'll come back tomorrow." I bent and gently kissed his cool, pale forehead. He gave a faint nod, already fading off. My heart splintered, knowing our remaining time together was now mercilessly short. I left the hospital in a gloomy daze. Getting into my truck, I glanced up and froze. Parked nearby sat a sleek black Mercedes I knew all too well. Evelyn and Declan emerged from the hospital doors, walking with brusque purpose. Evelyn fussed with her ostentatious jewelry while Declan talked urgently. Though I couldn't hear their conversation, their expressions said everything. Like vultures still greedily circling, desperate to pick the bones clean the moment their chance arrived. My hands tightened on the steering wheel as I observed their schemes continuing literally over Dad's deathbed. Resolve coursed through me, stealing my spine. Come what may, those deceitful snakes would not claim my father's life work. I swore that solemn oath on his very name, a name that, unlike them, actually meant something. I sat hunched over my drawing table, blearily sketching label concepts as I tried tuning out the world. Losing myself in work was the only respite from the relentless dread from Dad's prognosis that haunted me. As I reached for my coffee mug, voices sounded from the hallway. I paused, recognizing Evelyn and Declan's shrill tones drifting from Dad's study nearby. Curiosity piercing through my gloom, I quietly crept toward their half-open door, keeping hidden. "The revised will is almost ready," Declan said. "My guy assured me the substituted documents will hold up fine in probate." Evelyn scoffed. "It better. We already greased that lawyer's palm enough." I bristled with outrage. So that's why Declan's fancy Mercedes had sat parked outside some high-rise law office building when I'd spotted it downtown recently. They were circumventing Dad's true last wishes by tampering with his will. "With Marshall on his deathbed, the timing's perfect to file these," Declan continued. "By the time anyone contests, we'll have the inheritance and brewery secured." "And you're certain Marshall left you and Ryder equal shares?" Evelyn asked sharply. "We can't risk that stubborn fool blocking us like always." Declan snorted. "Please, Ryder's an idealistic pushover, blinded by sentiment. He'll be easily manipulated once the old man's gone." Red-hot fury surged through me. Jaw clenched, I stormed into the study. "How dare you!" I thundered. Evelyn and Declan spun toward me, eyes wide. Evelyn recovered first. "Ryder, what nonsense are you shouting about now?" She tittered nervously. I jabbed an accusing finger. "I heard everything. You two make me sick," I vowed through gritted teeth. "I'll die before I let you steal Dad's legacy." Declan sneered. "Bold words, little brother, but you're no match for us." He snatched the forged documents off the desk and brushed past me, Evelyn following hastily. At the doorway, they paused. Evelyn's smile held wicked triumph. "Don't worry, darling. We'll take good care of the inheritance." Their mocking laughter trailed behind them as they departed. I stood trembling, overwhelmed by fury and frustration. Dad still clung to life while these ghouls eagerly awaited his demise to plunder what he held most dear. I couldn't let them win, but I was just one man. If I confronted them directly, things could get ugly fast. I'd need help to defeat their schemes. Grabbing my truck keys, I strode outside towards downtown, my stampeding thoughts bent on only one goal: finding a ruthless attorney to aid my cause before Declan and Evelyn filed those forged documents. One way or another, I refused to let my father's life's work, his most precious legacy meant to benefit so many, get devoured by those deceitful monsters. The brewery's rightful future now rested on my shoulders alone. I just prayed I could endure the brutal fight ahead. I sat at Dad's bedside, gloom settled on my shoulders like a leaden weight. His health spiraled rapidly now, his lucid moments growing shorter. But today he seemed strangely at peace. His eyes shone clear and bright as he studied me. "You seem troubled, son," he finally rasped. "What's on your mind?" I debated deflecting, not wanting to stress him further, but something in his steady, knowing gaze gave me pause. Dad always had a sage way of reading people. I sighed heavily. "It's Evelyn and Declan. They plan to contest your will and steal the brewery once you're gone. I overheard them scheming." Bitterness tainted my admission. Dad showed no surprise, merely nodding. Declan made contact with some shady attorney downtown. They'll likely file forged documents after the funeral to override your true wishes, I continued. I'm trying to stop them, but my helpless frustration choked off further words. Dad lay a comforting hand on my arm. Ryder, you underestimate your old man. I've safeguarded my legacy better than you realize. Amusement glinted in his tired eyes. As for Declan's attorney, he's actually on retainer in my service, has been for years. I gaped, confusion swirling through my gloom. Dad went on. The papers Declan paid him to draft are clever forgeries, good enough to dupe those two vultures once I'm gone. His mouth quirked with quiet triumph, but ultimately powerless. Stunned understanding dawned on me. Dad had cunningly orchestrated a trap, one scheduled to spring shut right on Declan and Evelyn's heels when they inevitably raced to plunder his fortune. So you outmaneuvered them, just like that? I stammered. Dad chuckled softly. Son, when you've built an empire like I have, you learn a few things. And keeping friends close while keeping potential enemies closer is one rule I've never forgotten. His smile held profound satisfaction. Declan and Evelyn's greed blinded them to the long game I've had in play this whole time. My true plans are safely encoded where they'll never access them. I slowly shook my head in awe. Even now, Dad remained 3 steps ahead. He clasped my hand tightly. Ryder, you and I know what truly matters in this life, and it sure as hell isn't money. Resolve stealing his voice, he continued. Swear to me now that you'll use your inheritance only for good. To lift others up, the brewery can transform so many lives. I firmly gripped his fragile hand between mine. I swear it, Dad, on my life. He studied me intently for a long moment before relaxing back, a satisfied smile playing on his lips. The cunning strategist who built an empire from nothing had secured his final victory, outfoxing the opportunists who sought to tear it all down. Leaving later as the winter sun sank low, I felt Dad's steady hand still grasping mine. Our solemn pact resonating with destiny's pull. The brewery's future now rested solely in my guardianship. But somehow I didn't feel alone. Dad's spirit would remain beside me, guiding my next moves, and when the time inevitably came, his master strategy would deliver justice once and for all. Of that, I became powerfully certain. The long game was still in ruthless play. I tugged at my tie, the black fabric suddenly feeling like a noose cinched around my throat. Dad's attorney, Mr. Silver, had gathered Evelyn, Declan, and I here, a week after the funeral, to execute Dad's will. I hadn't spoken to either of them since the solemn service. As far as they knew, the revised documents Declan provided were now legal and binding. The brewery would soon be theirs, if only they knew what was coming. Almost against my will, I felt a swell of dark anticipation. Right on time, Evelyn and Declan swept in, their tailored mourning clothes unable to disguise their rapacious confidence. Clearly, they both expected this would be a quick, clean coup. They pointedly ignored me as we all sat. Mr. Silver cleared his throat. We're here to discuss Marshall's last will and testament. Withdrawing a sealed manila envelope, he slid on his glasses. Let's proceed. Evelyn shifted forward eagerly in her seat while Declan lounged back, oozing a casual smugness that nearly made me lunge across the table at him. I focused on keeping my composure. To my beloved wife Evelyn, Mr. Silver read aloud, I leave sole ownership of our 20-acre Aspen vacation property and a lump sum allowance of $500,000 to sustain your lifestyle indefinitely. Evelyn blinked rapidly, blindsided. Her entitlement had clearly expected the entire brewery empire, not some backup retirement package. Declan shot her an irritated glare, as if this was somehow her fault. Meanwhile, a fierce swell of satisfaction rose in my chest. I could practically envision Dad's smug grin right now at his ultimate checkmate. Clearing his throat again, Mr. Silver proceeded to the next section, addressing Declan. To my son Declan, I leave a lump sum of $300,000. Declan jolted forward in disbelief. What? That's all? He seized the documents, frantically scanning the terms. Mr. Silver gave him a long look over his glasses. As specified in your father's will, that inheritance comes with stipulations. You will receive it incrementally over the next 5 years, provided you maintain verified employment and refrain from engaging in further illegal activities, which we will be monitoring closely. Declan's face purpled, clashing horribly with his crimson hair. He spluttered incoherently, years of entitled expectations crashing down on him all at once. Somewhere I was certain Dad watched with deep satisfaction. I almost felt pity for Declan. Almost. But after everything he and Evelyn put our family through, his misery seemed only just punishment. Finally, Mr. Silver turned his attention to me. Holding my gaze, he announced, "Ryder, to you Marshall leaves full ownership of the brewery." "No," Evelyn shrieked, shooting to her feet. "That company belongs to me." In that moment, her polished veneer evaporated, exposing her for the desperate, greedy opportunist she was. Declan only stared hollowly into space, the reality of his severed silver spoon smothering any reaction. I weathered their outbursts calmly, letting a small, satisfied smile tug at my lips. In his final act, Dad utterly outmaneuvered them all. Justice came for those who poisoned our family with greed, and now the company Dad built from the ground up was protected, its future preserved to keep his spirit alive. "The handcuffs you slipped years ago finally locked tight today around your greedy hands," I muttered. "Rest in that uneasy peace." As Declan and Evelyn unleashed their impotent fury within the trap Marshall built years ago, I simply sat back, savoring my father's last perfect victory. In the weeks following the explosive will reading, I threw myself into learning the brewery business. As Dad's hand-picked successor, I needed to understand every aspect of the company now under my stewardship. I toured the grounds, talking with employees and learning their roles hands-on. The seasoned workers taught me the intricate brewing process, from selecting premium ingredients right down to bottling and distribution. As I reviewed accounting records, the picture came into clear focus. Dad built this empire from the ground up, showing me the deeper meaning behind his years of endless work. The company meant far more than profit margins to him. It meant community. Jobs for hundreds, partnerships with local farms, families sustained for generations. The brewery wove lives together in a way I never fully appreciated until now. Late one evening, as I finalized a new hire's papers, loud shouts rang out from the parking lot. I rushed outside to investigate. My gut tightened at what I saw. Evelyn and Declan stood screaming at Tom, Dad's loyal head brewer of 20 years. In the shadows lurked several suited men with hard expressions. Evelyn's usually polished blonde hair hung in frazzled strands as she jabbed a finger at Tom. "You have no right to block us," she shrilled. "Marshall promised us control." Tom stood firm, arms crossed. "This is Mr. Ryder's brewery now, as Mr. Marshall wanted. I aim to uphold his wishes." Declan grabbed Tom's shirt, wrenching the older man close. "Tell us the access codes to the system mainframe now," he growled, "or my associates will convince you the hard way." The suited men cracked their knuckles, malice glinting in their eyes. Tom paled but lifted his chin. "I won't betray Mr. Marshall's son. Do your worst." Rage exploded within me. I stalked forward, muscles coiled tight. "Let him go!" My shout echoed sharply. Everyone froze. Evelyn recovered first, her smile dripping false sweetness. "Ryder, darling, we were just having a chat with Tom here." I cut through her facade with a blistering glare. "Get off my property, now." Declan released Tom hastily as they scrambled to their car. Pausing, Evelyn hissed at me, "You'll pay for this," before peeling out down the road. I watched them go, chest heaving. So now they resorted to threats and violence, revealing desperation to reclaim what they considered their lost inheritance. Well, that was never happening. I turned to Tom, who gave me a grateful nod. In that small gesture, I recognized the deeper bond of trust Dad and Tom shared now flowing to me. As we walked back inside, steely purpose took root within me. Evelyn and Declan wanted war? Fine. For the brewery, for Dad, and for Tom, I would give them absolute hell. No more playing nice. That time ended when they laid hands on my people and tried dismantling Dad's legacy. If those snakes wanted a fight, I would rain fire on their ambitions until only ashes remained. My father's company now lived through me, and I protected what was mine. I signed the last document with a satisfied flourish before leaning back in my leather office chair. It had taken months of legal battles, but Evelyn and Declan's desperate attempts to seize Dad's company had finally failed. They put up a vicious fight at first, using every ruthless tactic imaginable to undermine me. Bribery, threats, lawsuits. But I refused to cave. Armed with Dad's ironclad will and evidence gathered against them over the years, I systematically demolished their campaign. The look on their faces when the judge dismissed their case with prejudice almost made all the headaches worthwhile. It was a crushing defeat, both legally and financially. Pursuing payments for their bloated legal fees bankrupted their extravagant lifestyles. Evelyn had to sell off her gaudy jewelry just to afford her clutching lawyers. Last I heard, she moved into some budget retirement village downstate, her fall from fortune now complete. As for Declan, criminal charges soon caught up with him for past shady dealings, finally severing his privileged safety net for good. He deserved worse, but knowing he languished in prison was consolation enough. Their poisonous presence finally vanished from my life, and more importantly from Dad's company. Still, caution lingered. Tom upgraded security measures and instituted new protocols to prevent any remaining insider threats. After avoiding catastrophe by a hair, no chances could be taken with protecting the brewery's future. With operations now safe, I focused energy into the workforce. Employees received expanded healthcare coverage and retirement matching. New family-friendly policies made the workplace more accessible. Dad built this company to sustain lives. Now more than ever, with Evelyn and Declan's toxicity gone, his vision deserved nurturing. Gazing around my office, memories swelled within me. The antique oak furniture, leather-bound books, and Mustang car models transporting me back to eager days as a boy, sitting at Dad's feet listening with wonder as he strategized ambitious plans for growth, back when we shared joy and possibility instead of pain and betrayal. Now at last I understood why he stood guard over this empire so protectively. It represented the best of his spirit and life's passion. Not just wood, brick, and steel buildings, housing stainless steel vats and bottling machinery, but the culmination of community and purpose he willed into existence from imaginings of a better future for all. A quiet knock interrupted my reminiscing. I glanced up as Tom stepped in. "The scholarship fund paperwork is ready for your review," he said. "Once you approve, we can announce it at the annual gala next month." I smiled broadly. Using a large portion of my inheritance, I established a memorial scholarship in Dad's name to fund the brewery education and training costs for underprivileged youth. By empowering eager minds from challenging backgrounds, the fund ensured Dad's legacy continued transforming lives for generations to come. "Sounds perfect," I said, scrawling my signature across the documents. "Let's make the announcement." Tom's eyes shone bright. As we left the office to oversee the bottling line, I sensed Dad walking beside us, grinning wide at what his life's work had grown into. The company remained now exactly as he envisioned, a force elevating our community through integrity and vision. By safeguarding its future from those who tried claiming it for greed's sake, the brewery and Dad's ideals would continue changing lives. His spirit thrived in every bottle produced, reminding me what truly matters. Not wealth or assets, but people and potential. Thank you, Dad, for showing me what legacy means. Yours will never be forgotten.
Success tastes like vanilla lip gloss and overpriced airport coffee. I'm riding that high, my presentation deck still hot in my laptop bag. The deal I just closed worth more than Jake makes in 2 years. The taxi cuts through evening traffic, and I practice different ways to tell him about the promotion. Maybe this time he'll actually smile. My phone buzzes. Rachel's text reads, "You crushed it, boss lady. Drinks tomorrow?" I type back a quick hell yes before shoving the phone in my purse. The house comes into view, dark except for the bedroom window. Strange. Jake's car is in the driveway, but he usually leaves every light on like he's signaling aircraft. The front door creaks, another thing he promised to fix months ago. "Jake? I'm home early. Got some amazing news." Silence answers. Then shuffling upstairs. My heels click against the hardwood as I climb the stairs, each step matching my heartbeat. The bedroom door is ajar, spilling yellow light into the hallway. I push it open. Jake stands by our bed, my clothes scattered across it like fallen leaves. An open suitcase sits in the middle of the chaos. "What are you doing?" My voice comes out smaller than I intended. He doesn't turn around, just keeps folding my favorite blazer with mechanical precision. "What does it look like?" "It looks like you're packing my things without asking me first." I step closer, grab the blazer from his hands. Stop that. Talk to me. Finally, he faces me. His eyes are red-rimmed, but his voice is steady. I can't do this anymore, Kiara. This. Pretending we're equals when we both know you've left me in the dust. What are you talking about? I just closed the biggest deal of my career, and instead of celebrating with me, you're what, throwing me out? See? That's exactly it. He laughs, but it sounds wrong, like breaking glass. Every conversation circles back to your career, your success, your fucking achievements. When's the last time you asked about my day? My promotion that I didn't get? Again? I reach for his arm. He steps back. Jake, don't. He holds up a hand. Just don't. You know what Derek said to me yesterday? He said, "Man, your wife's killing it. Not us. Not you and me. Just you." Do you have any idea how that feels? The room spins slightly. I grab the bedpost to steady myself, my knuckles white against the dark wood. So this is about your ego? Because I'm successful? This is about respect. He slams the suitcase shut, making me jump. About being able to look my friends in the eye without wondering if they're pitying me. About not feeling like a fucking failure in my own home. I never made you feel that way. You didn't have to. His voice drops to a whisper. Your existence does it for you. The words hit like a physical blow. I sink onto the edge of the bed, crushing something underneath me. Pulling it out, I recognize the pregnancy test I took this morning. Positive. The one I was going to surprise him with after sharing my promotion news. Jake follows my gaze, sees what I'm holding. For a moment, his face crumples. Then it hardens again, like cement setting. Perfect timing, he says, each word dripping with venom. Now you can be the breadwinner and the mother. The complete package. Who needs me at all? I stand up, my legs shaking but my voice steady. You're right. Who needs you? The test falls from my hand, clattering on the floor between us like a gauntlet thrown. Neither of us moves to pick it up. I'll be at my mother's, I say, grabbing my purse. Send my things there. And Jake? Congratulations. You just made the biggest mistake of your life. I walk out, leaving him standing in a graveyard of designer suits and shattered dreams. My hands don't shake until I'm in the taxi, watching our house disappear in the rearview mirror. Only then do I allow myself to smile, thinking about all the ways I'm going to make him regret this moment. 3 months into the pregnancy, and my mother's guest room feels more like home than the house Jake and I built together. The morning sickness has finally eased, leaving room for a different kind of nausea, the kind that comes from watching your husband pretend everything's fine on social media while he's busy erasing you from his life. He posted another photo with Derek at that new steakhouse, Rachel says, scrolling through her phone during our lunch break. Caption reads, "Living my best life." What a piece of work. I stab at my salad, imagining each cherry tomato is Jake's inflated ego. Let him play happy bachelor. We both know he's dying inside. Speaking of dying. Rachel lowers her voice. The board approved your proposal for the Asian market expansion. Jake's company was counting on that contract. The lettuce suddenly tastes sweeter. You're sure? 100%. Derek let it slip to marketing that Jake's team had already started hiring people for the project. Now they'll have to let them go. My hand instinctively moves to my growing belly. The baby kicks, as if approving my silent satisfaction. The elevator dings, and I spot Linda from HR heading our way. She's wearing that expression that means trouble, the one that makes her look like she's sucking on a lemon. Kiara, do you have a moment? Her voice carries across the break room. It's about your maternity leave paperwork. In her office, Linda slides a form across her desk. Jake called. He's requesting to be removed as your emergency contact and insurance beneficiary. The paper blurs before my eyes. He what? I know this is delicate. But given your situation, we need to update your file. And she hesitates. He mentioned you might be leaving the company soon? My laugh comes out sharp enough to cut glass. Did he now? He seemed quite certain about it. Said you'd discussed focusing on family full-time. I leaned forward, both hands flat on her desk. Linda, let me be crystal clear. The only thing I'm leaving is my marriage. This company, my career, that's not negotiable. That evening, I find my mother in her garden, attacking weeds with the same intensity I'd shown that salad. She looks up when my shadow falls across her work. Jake called here too, she says, not bothering with hello. Wanted to know if you'd come to your senses yet. And? I told him the only sense you've come to is the good kind. She sits back on her heels, studying my face. He's scared, you know. Men like that, when they lose control. They lash out, I finish. Try to take whatever power they can grab. Exactly. She pulls off her gardening gloves. Which is why you need to be smarter. Stronger. More calculated than he is. My phone buzzes, a text from Jake, we need to talk about the house. And the baby. Stop avoiding me. I'm not avoiding anything, I mutter, typing back, lawyer. Everything goes through the lawyer. He's at the door, my mother says suddenly, peering through the kitchen window. Speaking of avoiding. I hear his knock, then his voice, Kiara. I know you're in there. We have to discuss this like adults. My mother moves to answer, but I catch her arm. No. Let him stand there. Let him feel what it's like to be shut out. We sit in the darkened kitchen, listening to his increasingly aggressive knocks. Finally, his voice cracks, please. I made a mistake. I can't stand feeling this way. The baby kicks again, harder this time. I press my hand against the spot, remembering how he couldn't even look at the pregnancy test that night. That's the thing about mistakes, Jake, I whisper, though he can't hear me through the door. They have consequences. His footsteps eventually fade. My mother switches on the light, her face a mix of pride and concern. You're not just protecting yourself anymore, she says, nodding at my belly. No, I agree, already planning my next move. I'm protecting both of us. And I'm going to make sure he never forgets that. Through the window, I watch his car disappear into the darkness, knowing tomorrow will bring another battle. But this time, I'm ready. This time, I'm not the one who'll end up losing everything. The coffee shop across from Jake's office wasn't my usual scene, but it offered the perfect vantage point. I'd been sitting here for an hour, watching Derek's familiar figure pace outside, phone pressed to his ear. The conversation seemed heated, even from this distance. My own phone buzzed, Rachel's daily check-in. You sure about this? Spying isn't exactly your style. I typed back, not spying. Gathering intelligence. The baby shifted restlessly, as if sensing my tension. At 6 months, she was becoming quite the accomplice in my surveillance missions. I rubbed my belly, whispering, just a little longer, sweetheart. Derek finally ended his call and headed inside. I pulled my baseball cap lower, angling my laptop screen to hide my face. He ordered, then slumped into a booth behind me. Jake, man, you need to get it together. Another call. The board's asking questions about the project delays. Yeah, I know it's her fault, but you can't keep telling people she sabotaged it. It looks desperate. My fingers tightened around my cup. Sabotage? That was new. Listen, Derek continued, his voice dropping. People are starting to talk. They're saying you're obsessed, that you're letting your personal shit affect your judgment. The Asian market deal? That wasn't her fault. We lost it fair and square. A pause. Then, no, I'm not taking her side. I'm trying to save your ass before you get fired. You really think telling everyone your pregnant wife stole your clients is a good look? My hand shook as I reached for my phone, opening the voice recorder app. This was better than I'd hoped. The drinking has to stop too, Derek added. Coming to work hungover, missing meetings. Jesus, Jake, you're doing her work for her. She doesn't need revenge when you're self-destructing this spectacularly. I almost felt sorry for Derek. Almost. But he'd enabled Jake's behavior for months, playing the sympathetic friend while watching him spiral. The chair behind me scraped as Derek stood. Fine. Don't listen. But when everything falls apart, remember I warned you. I waited until he left before gathering my things. Outside, the autumn air carried the scent of wood smoke and possibilities. My lawyer would be very interested in this recording. Back at my mother's, I found her in the kitchen with an unexpected visitor. Rachel sat at the counter, clutching a manila envelope. What's wrong? I asked, noting their expressions. Rachel slid the envelope toward me. HR forwarded this to my desk by mistake. It's an email chain between Jake and your company's biggest competitors. He's been trying to warn them away from working with you. My hands trembled as I read. Phrases jumped out: unstable behavior, professional concerns, liability risks. Each word was carefully chosen to cast doubt. To poison potential clients against me without making direct accusations. He's trying to destroy my career, I whispered. All while playing victim at his own company. My mother's face hardened. He's trying to make you dependent. Vulnerable. Classic abuser tactics. No, I said, straightening. He's giving me exactly what I need. Proof. I pulled out my phone, playing Derek's recorded conversation. Rachel's eyes widened. Holy shit, she breathed. With this and the emails? We can prove harassment, I finished. Professional sabotage. And when the baby comes? He won't have a leg to stand on, my mother concluded, a fierce pride in her voice. My phone lit up with Jake's number. For the first time in weeks, I answered. Missing me? I kept my voice honey sweet. Kiara, please. He sounded desperate. I need you to call off whatever you're doing. My job. Everything's falling apart. Funny how that happens when you try to destroy someone else's life. I never. Save it for the lawyers, Jake. And maybe next time, don't put your sabotage attempts in writing. The silence on his end was deafening. Finally, he whispered, You knew? I know everything. I ended the call, feeling the baby kick approvingly. And this is just the beginning. Rachel and my mother exchanged looks. They knew that tone, the one that meant I wasn't just fighting back anymore. I was going for the kill. The pregnancy books never mentioned how revenge could make morning sickness worse. 7 months along, and I'm bent over my mother's toilet, heaving up bile and regret after reading Jake's latest email to my clients. Each word a carefully crafted poison, designed to make me look unstable, unreliable, unworthy of their trust. My phone vibrates against the tile floor. Rachel's text reads, Board meeting in 30. They're discussing your accounts. Jake's brother-in-law is making waves. Of course. I'd forgotten about Michael on the board. Family loyalty runs deep, especially when there's money involved. The doorbell rings as I'm rinsing my mouth. Through the bathroom window, I spot Derek's car in the driveway. My mother's voice drifts up the stairs, polite but steel-edged, she's not receiving visitors. Please, Derek's voice cracks. 5 minutes. It's about Jake. I crack the door open, catching their conversation. He's drinking at work now. Keeping a bottle in his desk. Yesterday he screamed at an intern until she cried, all because she mentioned Kiara's marketing campaign. That sounds like Jake's problem, my mother says. He's going to lose everything. The company's building a case for termination. I thought. Maybe if Kiara talked to him. I step into view, one hand cradling my belly. So I can save him? Again? Like I've been doing our entire marriage? Derek startles, taking in my appearance. Jesus, Kiara. You look pregnant? Exhausted? Like someone whose husband is trying to destroy her career while drinking himself into oblivion? He has the decency to look ashamed. He's sick. He needs help. And I need to protect my daughter. I descend the stairs slowly, deliberately. Did you know he's been contacting my clients? Spreading rumors about my mental state? Using his brother-in-law to undermine me at board meetings? Derek pales. That's not. He wouldn't. I pull out my phone, playing the recording from the coffee shop. His own voice fills the room, confirming Jake's spiral. Then I show him the emails. Still want to defend him? I came here to help, he whispers. No. You came here to ease your guilt. You watched him self-destruct for months. Helped him hide it. Now that there are consequences, you want me to clean up his mess? The baby kicks hard, making me wince. Derek reaches out instinctively, then pulls back when my mother steps between us. I have proof of everything, I continue. The harassment, the sabotage, the drinking. One call to HR and his career is over. Is that what you want? What do you want? He counters. The question hits harder than expected. What do I want? Revenge? Justice? Peace? My phone buzzes again. Rachel, board voted. They're freezing your accounts pending investigation into concerns raised about your stability. The room tilts slightly. My mother grabs my arm, steadying me. I want him to feel what I'm feeling right now, I say finally. The helplessness. The betrayal. The knowledge that someone you trusted is systematically destroying everything you've built. He'll lose everything, Derek pleads. Good. I meet his gaze. Because that's exactly what he deserves. After Derek leaves, my mother helps me to the couch. You're shaking. I'm angry. I press my hands against my belly, feeling my daughter's movements. He's forcing my hand. If I don't act now, I'll lose everything I've worked for. My clients, my reputation. Your revenge is becoming an obsession, she observes quietly. Just like his insecurity did. The words sting because they're true. I'm becoming what I hate, letting Jake's actions control my choices even now. My phone lights up with Jake's number. Instead of ignoring it, I answer. Congratulations, I say before he can speak. You've finally gotten what you wanted. I'm taking my maternity leave early. Effective immediately. His breath catches. Kiara. But here's what you don't know, Jake. I'm not retreating. I'm regrouping. And when I come back, I stroke my belly, feeling my daughter's strength. Well, you might want to keep that bottle in your desk handy. I end the call, already drafting emails in my head. Jake thinks he's won this round, but he's forgotten something crucial. I've always played the long game better than him. And I'm just getting started. Labor pains feel a lot like revenge, sharp, purposeful, and ultimately worth the agony. I grip the hospital bed rails, timing my breaths between contractions, while Rachel reads from her phone. Jake's company announced major layoffs this morning. His department was hit hardest. She pauses. Derek says he cleared out his office yesterday. Another contraction hits. I focus on the pain, letting it fuel me. Good timing. The lawsuit papers will find him at home. Kiara, my mother warns from her chair. Maybe wait until after. No. I force myself to sit up straighter. The papers go out today. I want him served while I'm bringing his daughter into the world, the daughter he pretended didn't exist when he tried to destroy me. The nurse enters, checking monitors. Blood pressure's elevated. Try to stay calm. Calm? I want to laugh. I've spent months gathering evidence, building my case, watching Jake self-destruct while he thought I was hiding. Now, as my body prepares to deliver new life, my lawyers are delivering the final blow to his career. Rachel's phone buzzes. Derek again. Says Jake's not handling the layoff well. He's threatening to come here. He can try. My mother moves to the door, as if preparing to guard it personally. Security has his photo. Another contraction rips through me, stronger this time. The nurse frowns at the monitor. Baby's showing signs of distress. We need to get your pressure down. My phone lights up, Jake's number. Before anyone can stop me, I answer. Enjoying unemployment? My voice sounds strangled, even to me. You did this. His words slur slightly. Somehow, you orchestrated all of it. The client losses, the internal investigation, everything. You did it to yourself. I grip the rail harder as pain builds again. I just made sure everyone saw who you really are. I'm coming to the hospital. You can't keep my daughter from me. Watch me. The contraction peaks, and I can't hide my gasp. Are you in labor? His voice shifts, showing the first real emotion I've heard in months. Kiara, please. Let me be there. The monitor's beeping increases. The nurse moves quickly, adjusting equipment. Baby's heart rate is dropping. We need to prep for emergency C-section. My mother takes the phone. Jake, listen carefully. If you come here, I'll have you arrested. This is what you chose when you tried to destroy my daughter's life. Live with it. She ends the call as medical staff swarm the room. Through the chaos, I hear Rachel reading a text. Jake's brother-in-law just resigned from the board. Says he can't defend his actions anymore. I smile through the pain. Perfect timing. BP still rising, someone says. We need to move now. As they wheel me towards surgery, my mother squeezes my hand. Let it go, sweetheart. Focus on your daughter. But I can't. Even as they prep me for surgery, I'm calculating next moves. The lawsuit. The evidence against Jake's brother-in-law. The board members who'll face ethics investigations. The anesthesiologist leans over. Count backward from 10. 9. I think about Jake sitting alone in our empty house, career in ruins. 8. Rachel will ensure every potential employer knows about his drinking, his harassment. 7. My daughter will never know the man who chose pride over family. 6. The monitor's frantic beeping matches my racing thoughts. 5. My mother's worried face appears above me. 4. Your revenge won't keep her safe, she whispers. 3. But it will make sure Jake can never hurt us again. 2. The ceiling blurs. 1. As consciousness fades, I realize I'm crying. Not from pain or fear, but because part of me knows my mother's right. I'm giving birth to my daughter with hatred in my heart instead of joy. The last thing I hear is the doctor's voice, pressure's still climbing. We need to. Then darkness, and a final thought, what if winning this war costs me more than I'm willing to pay? 3 weeks after Emma's birth, I stand in our old driveway, my daughter sleeping against my chest in her carrier. The house looks smaller somehow, diminished like Jake's latest settlement offer sitting unopened in my purse. The key still works. Inside, everything's exactly as I left it, except for the empty bottles littering the coffee table. Jake's car isn't here, but Derek warned me he rarely leaves now except for job interviews he's too drunk to handle. Let's see what Daddy's been up to, I whisper to Emma, moving through rooms that feel like museum exhibits of my former life. In his home office, papers cover every surface, printouts of my emails, social media posts, news articles about the company's losses. Red marker circles names, draws connections, like a conspiracy theorist's fever dream. My phone buzzes. Rachel, board meeting ended. They're reinstating your accounts. Jake's brother-in-law confessed to everything. Victory should taste sweeter than this. Emma stirs, whimpering. I bounce her gently, studying Jake's wall of obsession. That's when I spot it, a familiar manila envelope tucked under some papers. My hands shake as I pull out photographs, me at doctor's appointments. Shopping for baby clothes. Having lunch with Rachel. All dated, annotated with times and locations. He's been stalking me. Beautiful girl, isn't she? I spin around. Jake stands in the doorway, swaying slightly. His clothes hang loose, his face gaunt beneath patchy stubble. You're drunk. I step backward, shielding Emma. Had to see her. He moves closer. My daughter. The one you used to destroy me. You destroyed yourself. Did I? He gestures at his wall. Or did you orchestrate everything? The client losses, the complaints, the investigation. You turned everyone against me. You did that when you chose your pride over your family. Emma starts crying. Jake flinches at the sound. Family? He laughs bitterly. You took that too. But I've been watching, Kiara. Learning your routines. Waiting. My back hits the desk. The photos scatter across the floor like fallen leaves. You need help, Jake. I need my life back. His shout makes Emma wail louder. Everything I had, my career, my reputation, my home, gone because you couldn't handle not being in control. Handle not being in control? My voice rises despite myself. You tried to sabotage my career. You spread lies about my mental health. I loved you. He slams his hand on the desk, inches from where I'm standing. And you made me feel worthless every single day. Emma's screams reach fever pitch. I need to get out, but Jake blocks the only exit. Move. No. His eyes fix on Emma. She's mine too. You can't keep taking things from me. He reaches for the carrier. I react instinctively, shoving him hard. He stumbles, catching himself against the doorframe. Don't you dare touch her. Or what? His smile is all wrong. You'll destroy me again? Too late, Kiara. You already did that. Now we're even. Footsteps thunder up the stairs. Derek appears behind Jake, Rachel close behind. Jesus Christ, Jake. Derek grabs his arm. What are you doing? Following my wife. Like she followed me. Watched me. Ruined me. Rachel edges past them, reaching for me. Come on. We're leaving. No one's leaving. Jake tries to shake off Derek's grip. Not until. Until what? My voice sounds strange, distant. Until you scare me enough? Hurt me enough? Make me feel as pathetic as you do? Emma's cries have subsided to hiccuping sobs. I touch her head, feeling her soft hair against my fingers. You want to know the difference between us, Jake? I built things. A career. A life. A future for our daughter. You only know how to destroy. Kiara, he whispers, and for a moment I see the man I married. Then his face hardens again. This isn't over. Yes, it is. I walk past him, my legs surprisingly steady. You're not even worth revenge anymore. Outside, the sun feels too bright. Rachel guides me to her car while Derek stays with Jake, already calling someone, rehab, maybe, or the police. In the back seat, I finally let myself shake, holding Emma close as she drifts back to sleep. My perfect revenge lies in ashes, leaving only the bitter taste of Pyrrhic victory and the weight of my daughter against my heart. The restraining order sits on my desk like a loaded gun. One signature, and Jake legally becomes a stranger. My lawyer says it's necessary after the stalking incident, but my pen hovers, uncertain. Emma sleeps in her carrier beside me while I review quarterly reports. Back at work for 2 weeks, and already the rhythm feels natural. Then my office door swings open. Jake stands there, sober and sharp in a new suit. Behind him, security guards rush forward, but he's already inside. "Don't call them," he says quietly. "Please." 5 minutes. I should press the panic button. Instead, I wave the guards back. 5 minutes. Then I'm signing these papers. He spots the restraining order, nods like he expected it. "I'm checking into rehab tomorrow. 30-day program." "Good for you." I keep my voice neutral, one hand resting near Emma's carrier. "I sold the house." He stays by the door, maintaining distance. "Used the money to pay back what I borrowed from the company. And..." He pulls out an envelope. "I wrote letters. To your clients, the board, everyone I contacted during my campaign. Confessing everything. Why?" "Because you were right." His voice cracks. "I only know how to destroy things. But I want to learn how to build instead. For her." He glances at Emma. "Even if I never get to be her father." "You'll always be her father, Jake. That's not something I can erase." "No, but you can protect her from becoming collateral damage in my self-destruction." He sets the envelope on a chair. "I'm not asking for forgiveness. Or another chance. I just wanted you to know I finally understand what I did. To you. To us." Emma stirs, making tiny sleep noises. Jake's face crumples for a moment before he rebuilds his composure. "Derek showed me the photos," I say. "The ones you took while stalking me." "I know. That's why I'm here." He pulls something else from his pocket, a memory card. "Every photo, every note, everything I collected during that time. Destroy it. I don't want to be that person anymore." My phone buzzes, Rachel texting that security is ready to intervene. I ignore it. You know what the worst part was? I stand, needing to move. Not the sabotage or the lies. It was watching you choose your pride over our daughter. Over and over. "I chose fear," he corrects. "Fear of being overshadowed. Of being irrelevant. Of not being enough." He laughs softly. "Turns out, those fears were self-fulfilling prophecies. And now? Now I'm afraid of something worse, that Emma will grow up knowing her father was a coward who tried to destroy her mother rather than face his own inadequacies." I look at the restraining order, then at Emma, then at Jake, this stranger wearing my husband's face, speaking truths instead of accusations. "Your 5 minutes are up." He nods, turning to leave. Then stops. "The company offered me my job back. After rehab. I turned it down." "Why?" "Because sometimes." He meets my eyes for the first time. "Sometimes you have to lose everything to understand what you should have valued in the first place." The memory card sits on my desk where he left it. Next to it, the restraining order waits for my signature. Tools of destruction and protection, revenge and redemption. Jake. He pauses at the door. "When you finish rehab. If you're serious about building things." I touch Emma's cheek. "She'll need a father who knows how to do that. I don't deserve." "This isn't about what you deserve. It's about what she deserves." I pick up the restraining order. "I'll hold on to this." As insurance. But I won't file it. Yet. He nods, understanding the weight of this small mercy. Thank you. After he leaves, I open my desk drawer, dropping the memory card inside. Evidence of who we were, preserved but not defining who we might become. Emma wakes, demanding attention. As I lift her, my revenge fantasy finally crumbles completely, replaced by something harder but more necessary, the slow, careful work of building a future from the ashes of our past. The unsigned restraining order sits in my bottom drawer like a loaded gun I never fired. Emma plays on the office floor, stacking wooden blocks while I review quarterly projections. Her dark hair falls in her eyes, Jake's eyes, as she concentrates on her tower. My phone buzzes. Derek's text reads, "Jake completed the program. Asked me to tell you." I set the phone down, watching Emma knock over her creation with a delighted squeal. She's already rebuilding, placing each block with careful determination. Rachel appears in my doorway, holding a familiar manila envelope. "This came for you." Hand-delivered. Inside, I find a single sheet of paper, Jake's resignation letter from his new job in Seattle. At the bottom, he's written, "Some distances aren't measured in miles." "You okay?" Rachel asks. "Better than okay." I file the letter with the restraining order. I'm done measuring distances. The intercom buzzes. "Miss Thompson? Your 3 o'clock is here. Send them in." I scoop Emma up, settling her on my hip. "Ready to meet Mommy's new client?" She babbles something that might be client or might be climb. These days, everything's a mountain to scale. The door opens. Jake stands there, clean-shaven in a charcoal suit, holding a presentation folder. "Thompson Consulting," he says quietly. "Independent contractor. If you'll have me." Emma reaches for him instinctively. I don't stop her. The Seattle job. I begin. Wasn't what I needed to build. He accepts Emma's weight, professional demeanor cracking as she pats his face. I had a good teacher about rebuilding things. I gesture to the visitor's chair, noting how he arranges Emma on his lap, protecting her from the edge of my desk. Some instincts run deeper than our mistakes. Why consulting? Because I finally learned what you knew all along: success isn't about power. It's about creating something sustainable. He opens his folder. I've got references. A business plan. Even some potential clients who need help restructuring there? Stop. I hold up a hand. This isn't a job interview. His face falls, but he nods. I understand. I just thought. It's a partnership negotiation. I pull out a contract draft I'd prepared weeks ago, watching his expression shift. 60-40 split. Separate accounts. Clear boundaries. You knew I'd come back. I knew you'd either rebuild or self-destruct. The choice was always yours. Emma squirms off his lap, returning to her blocks. We both watch as she starts a new tower, this one more ambitious than the last. I can't undo what I did, Jake says. No. But you can build something new. If you're ready to do the work. He studies the contract, then looks at our daughter. Some things are worth building slowly. I think about revenge, about justice, about the fine line between protecting what matters and destroying what threatens us. The unsigned restraining order whispers from its drawer, but its voice grows fainter each day. Sign it, I say, pushing the contract forward. Not because you deserve it. But because Emma deserves to see that broken things can be rebuilt. Better. Stronger. Different. As Jake reaches for the pen, Emma's tower collapses again. Instead of crying, she laughs, already gathering blocks for another attempt. Like mother, like daughter, Jake murmurs. No, I correct him, watching Emma work. Like herself. That's all she needs to be. He signs the contract, his hand steady. Outside my office, Rachel gives me a questioning look through the glass. I nod, just once. She smiles and turns away, carrying my unspoken message: sometimes revenge isn't about destroying your enemies. Sometimes it's about building something they can't tear down. Emma holds up a block, offering it to both of us. In her small hands, it looks less like a weapon and more like a foundation stone. Jake and I reach for it together, our fingers brushing briefly as we help our daughter start again. Not with forgiveness, that's still a distant shore. But with something more essential, the understanding that some things are worth building, even from the ashes of what we burned.
The cursor blinked accusingly on my screen, each flash like a tiny dagger to my heart. 3 times I read the email, hoping the words would somehow rearrange themselves into something less devastating. They didn't. I'm Ashlyn, and until 5 minutes ago, I thought I had my life figured out. The attached photos made a mockery of that belief. My husband Dylan, the man who'd kissed me goodbye this morning, was wrapped around a woman who definitely wasn't me. The timestamp showed last Tuesday, when he'd claimed to be at a business conference in Seattle. Mom? Are you okay? Sophie's voice pierced through my spiral. She stood in my home office doorway, her 13-year-old face scrunched with concern. I slammed my laptop shut. Just work stuff, honey. Everything's fine. You look like you're going to throw up. Thanks for that assessment. I forced a smile. Don't you have homework? Already done. Dad texted. He's working late again. Of course he was. My fingers curled into fists beneath my desk. Right. How about pizza for dinner? You hate ordering pizza on weeknights. Maybe I'm feeling rebellious. The word tasted bitter on my tongue. Sophie lingered, and I could feel her studying me with those 2 perceptive eyes she inherited from her father. Really, sweetheart. I'm fine. After she left, I reopened the laptop. The anonymous email waited. Thought you should know what your husband's really been doing. A friend. Below that, 5 photos, each more damning than the last. The woman was younger, blonde, wearing a dress that probably cost more than my monthly car payment. My phone buzzed. Dylan's message popped up: big project. Don't wait up. Love you. I wanted to vomit. Instead, I opened our banking app. There it was, a charge from the Fairmont Olympic Hotel, carefully labeled as conference registration fee. My IT background kicked in. Within minutes, I had access to his email, calendar, credit card statements. The truth unfolded like a map of betrayal, each discovery a new pin in my heart. Ashlyn? My mother's voice came through my headset. I must have dialed her without realizing. What's wrong? Nothing. Everything. Just checking in. Don't lie to your mother. I can hear it in your voice. I swallowed hard. Mom, I need to handle something. But I might need your help with Sophie soon. Whatever you need, sweetheart. She paused. Is it Dylan? How did you? Mothers know these things. And I never trusted that smile of his. Too perfect. A laugh escaped me, sharp and hollow. I have to go. Sophie needs dinner. Call me tomorrow. Promise me. I promise. After hanging up, I stared at the evidence spread across my screen. 15 years of marriage, and I'd never once checked his accounts. Never questioned his late nights or business trips. Trust, I'd called it. Stupidity, looking back. My cursor hovered over the forward button. One click and I could send everything to his boss, his family, our friends. But Sophie's face flashed in my mind, and I forced myself to think. Dylan had always underestimated me, treated my tech skills as cute hobby rather than a career. He probably thought I'd never find out, or if I did, I'd be too scared to act. He was wrong on both counts. I closed the email without forwarding it. Instead, I opened a new document and began typing, methodically listing every account, every transaction, every lie I'd uncovered. By the time Sophie called up that the pizza had arrived, I had the beginnings of a plan. Dylan wanted to play games? Fine. But he'd forgotten something crucial. In chess, the queen is the most powerful piece on the board. And I'd just made my opening move. Dylan came home late that night, smelling of expensive cologne and whiskey. I watched him stumble through his nightly routine from behind my laptop screen, my fingers never pausing as I documented another string of suspicious transactions. Still working? He loosened his tie, flashing that perfect smile that used to make my heart skip. Now it just made my stomach turn. The farm tech project again? Someone has to pay attention to our future. The words came out sharper than I intended. His smile flickered. What's that supposed to mean? Nothing. I forced myself to look back at my screen. Just tired. You know, if you're worried about money, I could always. I'm not worried about money. I was worried about the $20,000 he'd withdrawn last month, labeled as business investment. I was worried about the credit card charges at jewelry stores that had never resulted in gifts from me. I was worried about how easily lies slipped from his lips. Sophie appeared in the doorway, already in her pajamas. Dad, you missed pizza night. Sorry, princess. Big client dinner. He moved to hug her, but she stepped back. Whatever. Mom, can you help me with my coding project tomorrow? Of course, honey. Dylan's face darkened. Since when are you into coding? Since forever, Sophie shot back. You'd know that if you were ever home. Sophie, I warned, even as pride swelled in my chest. My daughter, so fierce, so perceptive. No, she's right. Dylan ran a hand through his hair. I've been working too much. How about this weekend we all go somewhere? The lake house maybe? The lake house where he'd taken his blonde mistress 3 weeks ago, according to his credit card statement. Can't, I said. I have a presentation Monday. Reschedule it. Like you reschedule your meetings? The words escaped before I could stop them. His eyes narrowed. What's going on with you lately? Nothing's going on with me. I closed my laptop with deliberate care. Sophie, bed. Now. After she left, Dylan moved closer, perching on the edge of my desk. Talk to me, Ash. You've been different all week. I looked up at him, studying the face I'd loved for 15 years. The slight crow's feet around his eyes, the dimple in his left cheek, the perfectly maintained stubble. I searched for any sign of guilt, any crack in his facade. There was nothing. Different how? I asked. Distant. Cold. He reached for my hand. I let him take it, fighting the urge to pull away. If something's bothering you, would you tell me? I interrupted. If something was bothering you? He blinked. Of course. Promise? I promise. He squeezed my hand. No secrets between us, right? I smiled, and for the first time in our marriage, I understood how easy it was to lie to someone you loved. Right. No secrets. Later, after he'd fallen asleep, I slipped down to Sophie's room. She was still awake, the blue light of her tablet illuminating her face. Mom? She sat up. Are you okay? I sat on the edge of her bed. Why wouldn't I be? Because. She hesitated, then turned her tablet toward me. On the screen was an email draft, addressed to an anonymous account. I found something. About Dad. My blood ran cold. What did you find? His passwords weren't even hard to crack. Her voice trembled. He's been. There's this woman. Stop. I pulled her into my arms, feeling her tears soak through my shirt. Listen to me. Whatever you found, whatever you were going to do, let me handle it. But. Promise me, Sophie. This isn't your burden to carry. She pulled back, wiping her eyes. What are you going to do? I thought about the evidence mounting on my laptop, about Dylan's easy lies over dinner. About the daughter who was too smart to be fooled by either of us. I'm going to protect us, I said. Both of us. But I need time to do it right. She nodded, her expression eerily similar to the one I'd seen in the mirror lately. I can help. I know you can. I kissed her forehead. But for now, just act normal. Can you do that? I learned from the best, she said, and I wasn't sure whether to be proud or heartbroken that my daughter had become such a good actor. The notification popped up on my screen at 3 a.m. Sophie had accessed Dylan's company email. Again. My daughter, the amateur hacker, was getting sloppy with her digital footprints. I reached for my phone to text her, then froze as another alert flashed. File transfer in progress. Multiple documents. Financial records. Damn it, Sophie, I muttered, throwing off my covers. But before I could reach her room, she burst into mine, tablet clutched to her chest. Mom, she whispered, face pale in the darkness. You need to see this. The spreadsheets told a story that made my blood run cold. Regular transfers from the company's Agricultural Development Fund, my project's funding source, to offshore accounts. Falsified reports. Doctored numbers. All traced back to Dylan's executive access codes. He's stealing from your project, Sophie said. That's why he never wanted you to succeed with it. My hands shook as I scrolled through the documents. How did you even find these? He used the same password pattern for everything. Amateur stuff. She perched on my bed, watching me process the information. There's more. About Claire. I looked up sharply. What about her? She works for one of the competing firms. The ones bidding against your project. Sophie pulled up another email thread. But I don't think she knows about the money. Look at their messages, she thinks he's leaving you for her. That they're going to start fresh together. A hollow laugh escaped me. Fresh. With stolen money. What are you going to do? Before I could answer, headlights swept across my bedroom wall. Dylan's car, pulling into the driveway at 3:30 a.m. Delete your traces, I hissed. Now. Go to bed. Sophie's fingers flew across her tablet as she hurried out. I slipped back under the covers, heart pounding, mind racing through possibilities. Minutes later, Dylan stumbled in, reeking of perfume and scotch. You're awake? He squinted at me. Couldn't sleep. Work stress. I watched him undress, this stranger wearing my husband's face. The project deadline's coming up. He paused, one shoe in hand. About that. The board's considering pulling funding. Budget cuts. Really? My voice stayed steady, even as rage burned through my veins. That's not what the quarterly reports showed. Things change fast in business, Ash. You know that. He slid into bed, reaching for me. Maybe it's for the best. You could focus on something else. I let him pull me close, fighting the urge to recoil. Like what? I don't know. Something less demanding. More family-oriented. Family-oriented. Like embezzlement and adultery? I wanted to scream the words, to throw his lies back in his face. Instead, I said, I'll think about it. The next morning, I waited until Dylan left for work, before calling the number I'd found in his emails. Hello? A woman's voice, younger than I expected. Claire Mitchell? Yes? Who's this? Someone who thinks you should know the truth about Dylan Parker. My voice remained calm, professional. And about the money he's been stealing from Morton Agricultural Technologies. Silence stretched across the line. Then, I don't know what you're talking about. Check your email in 5 minutes. And Claire? I'd think carefully about your next move. Your firm wouldn't want to be implicated in corporate espionage. I hung up and sent the files, carefully edited to protect Sophie's involvement. Then I called my mother. "I need you to take Sophie for a few days," I said when she answered. "It's happening, then?" "Yes." I watched Sophie through the window as she waited for her school bus. "Things are about to get messy. Be careful, Ashlyn. Men like Dylan don't take well to losing control." "I know." I touched my screen where Sophie's face had been moments before. "That's why I need to end this quickly. Before he realizes what's coming." "And Sophie? She's stronger than we think. Smarter too." Pride mixed with worry in my chest. "She'll understand eventually." After hanging up, I opened my laptop and began composing 2 emails. One to Morton's board of directors, outlining specific concerns about financial discrepancies. Another to Dylan's mistress, offering to meet and compare notes. The endgame was starting. I just hoped I could protect the ones I loved while burning everything else to the ground. The coffee shop buzzed with morning chatter, but Ben's silence spoke volumes as he studied the evidence spread across my tablet. 20 years of friendship meant he could read between the lines of what I wasn't saying. "Jesus, Ash." He pushed the tablet back, running a hand through his graying hair. "How long have you known?" 2 weeks. I wrapped my hands around my untouched latte. "Long enough to know it's not just about the affair anymore. The embezzlement makes it criminal." He leaned forward, lowering his voice. "You need to go to the police." "And then what?" "Watch Sophie's college fund disappear into legal fees." I shook my head. "There has to be another way." "Like blackmail?" His eyes narrowed. "That's not you, Ashlyn." Before I could respond, my phone lit up with a text from Claire, "Meeting you was a mistake." He explained everything. "Stay away from us." Ben read the message over my shoulder. "What did you do?" "Gave her enough rope." I showed him the screenshot I'd sent Claire. Dylan at dinner with another woman, neither of them Claire nor me. "Turns out our friend's been playing everyone." Christ. Ben's expression darkened. "You're enjoying this, aren't you?" The accusation stung because it was true. "Maybe I am." "Does that make me terrible?" "It makes you human." He hesitated. "But Sophie." My phone buzzed again. Dylan's name flashed on the screen. "We need to talk. Now. Come to the office." "He knows something's wrong," I said, gathering my things. Claire must have warned him. Ben caught my arm. "Don't go alone." "I have to. If I bring anyone else, he'll know I'm building a case." I forced a smile. "Besides, we're in his corporate office. What's the worst he could do?" "That's what scares me." Ben stood. "Call me when you're done." "Promise?" "Promise." The elevator ride to Dylan's floor felt endless. Through the glass walls, I watched Seattle's skyline blur behind rain clouds. The same view I'd admired when he first brought me here, proud to show off his success. Now every gleaming surface felt like a lie. His secretary's desk was empty. The whole floor seemed deserted, despite it being mid-morning. Dylan waited in his office, standing behind his desk like a king on his throne. "Shut the door," he said. I did, noting how his hands trembled slightly as he poured himself a drink. "It's 10 a.m., Dylan. Interesting time to meet your ex-boyfriend for coffee, too. Ben's been my friend since before I met you." "Right." He took a long sip. "Just like Claire's just a colleague?" The trap was obvious, but I stepped into it anyway. "Is that what she is?" "She called me. Very upset. Seemed to think I was living some kind of double life." His laugh held no humor. "Wonder where she got that idea?" "Maybe from the same place I got these." I pulled up the financial records on my phone, watching his face. "The agricultural fund, Dylan?" "Really?" Color drained from his face. "How did you?" "Does it matter?" I moved closer, voice steady, despite my racing heart. What matters is what happens next. Are you threatening me? I'm giving you a choice. The words tasted like ash. Either you come clean to the board about the embezzlement and give me full custody of Sophie, or I take everything to the police. Your career, your reputation, all of it. He set down his glass with exaggerated care. You really think you can prove any of this? I think your girlfriend might help, once she sees the photos of you with her best friend. His hand shot out, grabbing my wrist. You vindictive bitch. Let go. I didn't pull away, didn't show fear. You're on camera, remember? No. His smile turned cruel. I'm not. Maintenance day. Systems are down until noon. Funny timing, isn't it? Understanding hit like ice water. This wasn't a confrontation. It was a trap. Ben knows I'm here, I said quickly. Ben knows you're meeting your lying, cheating husband to talk about divorce. Dylan's grip tightened. Who's going to question if things get emotional? I heard the office door click shut behind me. Heels on hardwood. A familiar perfume. Hello, Ashlyn, Claire said. We need to talk about those emails you sent. The bruises on my wrist had faded to a sickly yellow, but I kept my sleeve pulled down during the video call with Sophie. Her face filled my laptop screen, worry lines too deep for a 13-year-old creasing her forehead. Dad keeps calling Grandma's house, she said. He sounds different. Scary different. Don't answer if he calls again. I glanced at my phone, where Ben's latest text glowed, police report filed. Restraining order in process. Just focus on your coding project. Mom. Sophie leaned closer to her camera. What happened in his office? Ben won't tell me anything. Nothing I couldn't handle. The lie tasted bitter, but necessary. I wouldn't tell her how Claire had recorded our confrontation, trying to bait me into admitting to blackmail. How Dylan's grip had left marks that proved useless without security footage. How I'd barely made it to the elevator before my hands started shaking. A notification popped up on my screen, an email from Morton Technologies' board of directors. My heart stopped. I have to go, honey. Love you. Mom, wait. I ended the call and opened the email. The board wanted an emergency meeting. Tomorrow. About financial irregularities in the agricultural fund. My phone rang, Dylan's number. I declined it, but a text followed immediately. You really think they'll believe you over me? I built that company. Another text, Claire's already told them you tried to extort us. Check your email. The second email contained a video clip. My voice, edited and stripped of context, give me full custody. Or I take everything. Your career, your reputation. My fingers hovered over the keyboard, mind racing. Dylan thought he had me cornered, but he'd forgotten something crucial. Something about Sophie's coding project. I dialed Ben. Tell me you didn't do anything stupid, he answered. Define stupid. I pulled up the command prompt on my laptop. Remember that backdoor Sophie found in the company's security system? Ashlyn, no. They're going to bury the embezzlement evidence. Frame me for extortion. Then we fight it legally. You can't. They have Sophie's college fund. Our savings. Everything. My fingers flew across the keyboard. I'm not letting him take anything else from us. At least wait until. A third email arrived, from Claire's personal account. The subject line made my blood run cold. Sophie's father? Attached was a DNA test from 13 years ago. One Dylan had apparently kept all this time. I have to go, I told Ben, and hung up despite his protests. The test results blurred through my tears. All those years of Dylan's subtle comments about Sophie's intelligence, her tech skills, her personality, so different from his. I'd defended our daughter, never suspecting he'd known all along she wasn't his. My phone buzzed again. Dylan, let's talk about Sophie's real father. Better yet, let's tell her. The rage that filled me was cold, clarifying. I opened Sophie's project folder, the one she'd been using to practice her coding. Inside was a program she'd written, designed to track and document system vulnerabilities. A program that had been running, undetected, on Dylan's company laptop for weeks. I typed out my response, check your email. Then I executed Sophie's program, watching as it compiled weeks of data, every fraudulent transaction, every altered record, every deleted security log. The program hadn't just tracked Dylan's crimes, it had recorded them in real time, creating an unalterable blockchain of evidence. My daughter. My brilliant, protective daughter. I forwarded everything to the board, the SEC, and Dylan's competitors. Then I sent one final email to Claire, attaching photos of Dylan with not one, but 3 other women. Still think I'm the one he's playing? My phone lit up with Dylan's call again. This time, I answered. You really should have paid more attention to Sophie's coding lessons, I said before he could speak. Turns out she inherited her real father's talent for exposing frauds. The silence on the other end was deafening. Then, very quietly, Dylan said, "You've just started a war." "No," I replied, thinking of Sophie, safe at my mother's house. "I've just ended one." The police station's fluorescent lights cast harsh shadows across Ben's face as he posted my bail. 3 a.m. and my hand still trembled from being fingerprinted. From Sophie's desperate voicemails I couldn't answer while in custody. Fraud, extortion, and corporate espionage. Ben's voice was flat as we walked to his car. Dylan's really outdone himself. He had it all planned. My voice sounded distant, hollow. The board meeting was a trap. They were waiting with security, with lawyers. Everything I sent them, he'd already twisted into evidence against me. We'll fight it. With what? I laughed, the sound bordering on hysteric. He froze our accounts. The house, the cars, everything's in his name. Even Sophie's college fund. Ben's grip tightened on the steering wheel. Sophie's safe at your mother's. For now. My phone buzzed, another text from Claire, he's filing for emergency custody. Says you're unstable, dangerous. I'm sorry. Sorry. Like that word could fix anything. We pulled up to Ben's apartment, and I finally asked the question burning in my throat, did you know? About what? Sophie. I turned to face him. The DNA test. Did you know she was yours? The silence stretched for 3 heartbeats. 4. 5. I suspected, he finally said. The timing. But you were so happy with Dylan. I couldn't. 13 years. My voice cracked. 13 years of watching her grow up calling another man Dad. Of watching him use her as a weapon against me. And you just watched. Ash. Don't. I got out of the car, legs barely holding me up. I need to call Sophie. But when I tried, the call wouldn't connect. Blocked number. I tried my mother's house. Same thing. Another text from Claire, Dylan's at your mother's. He's taking Sophie home. The world tilted sideways. Ben caught my arm as I stumbled. He can't, I whispered. The restraining order only covers you. Ben was already pulling up his phone. And with the charges against you. My phone rang, Dylan. Where are you? His voice was smooth, controlled. Victory wrapped in concern. Sophie's asking for you. Let me talk to her. I don't think that's wise, given your mental state. Breaking into corporate servers? Stealing company data? What were you thinking? I was thinking about protecting our daughter. The words tasted like ash. Our daughter? He laughed softly. We both know that's not true. Don't worry, though. I won't tell her. Not unless you force my hand. What do you want? Simple. Drop everything. Sign a confession, taking full responsibility for the fraud. Give me full custody. In return, I'll make sure you avoid jail time. Maybe even arrange supervised visits, eventually. Ben was watching me, his face a mirror of my own pain. The truth about Sophie hung between us like a physical thing. You have an hour to decide, Dylan continued. After that, I start telling Sophie exactly why her mother can't be trusted. Starting with who her real father is. The line went dead. I slid down Ben's apartment wall, the cold concrete grounding me as my world imploded. Everything I'd done to protect Sophie had only given Dylan more weapons to use against us. We need to call the police, Ben said. And tell them what? That the respected executive is keeping his daughter away from his unstable, criminal wife? My laugh turned into something like a sob. Face it, Ben. He's one. No. Ben crouched in front of me. Look at me, Ash. We're not done. I can't lose her. You won't. He pulled out his phone again. But we need help. Real help. Who? Claire Mitchell, he said, showing me a new text. She wants to meet. Says she has proof Dylan set you up. Proof that could save both you and Sophie. I stared at the message, hope warring with suspicion. It's probably another trap. Probably. Ben helped me up. But right now, it's the only play we have left. I thought of Sophie, scared and confused, trapped in Dylan's web of lies. Of 13 years of secrets about to explode. Make the call, I said. Claire chose the same coffee shop where this had all started. She sat alone, her designer purse on the table like a shield, hands wrapped around an untouched latte. No sign of a trap, but Ben still insisted on watching from his car outside. He's going to destroy you, she said as I sat down. He's already convinced the board you're unstable. Dangerous. Yet here you are. She pushed a USB drive across the table. Everything you need. The real financial records, recordings of him planning the setup, proof the DNA test was fabricated. I stared at her. Fabricated? Sophie is yours and Ben's. Dylan's known for years, but he needed leverage. Insurance. She laughed bitterly. Just like he needed me to play the desperate mistress. To help him frame you. My phone buzzed, Dylan, taking Sophie to the lake house for the weekend. Last chance to take the deal. Why are you helping me now? Because, Claire's voice caught. I'm pregnant. And I've seen what he does to children he claims to love. The coffee shop door chimed. Dylan walked in, Sophie trailing behind him. My heart stopped. Well, Dylan said, sliding into the seat beside Claire. This is cozy. Sophie's eyes were red-rimmed, her shoulders hunched. When she saw me, she started forward, but Dylan's hand shot out, gripping her arm. Dad, she whispered. You're hurting me. Sophie, I kept my voice steady, go wait with Uncle Ben in the car. She's not going anywhere. Dylan's smile was razor-sharp. Claire, the drive? Claire's hand trembled as she reached for the USB, but I was faster. I snatched it and stood, putting distance between us. It's over, Dylan. The real records, the recordings, everything's here. You mean these recordings? He pulled out his phone, played a clip of Claire and me discussing blackmail. Expertly edited from our previous conversations. Or maybe the financial records showing your embezzlement? Stop it, Sophie suddenly said. Just stop lying. Dylan's grip on her arm tightened. Sophie, honey. I sent the original email, she blurted out. About you and Claire. I found everything, the money, the affairs, all of it. And I recorded you. Every conversation, every meeting, every threat. It's all backed up to Mom's secure server. The color drained from Dylan's face. You're lying. Check your laptop. Sophie's voice shook but held firm. The program I wrote for my coding project? It wasn't just tracking your crimes. It was documenting them. Timestamped, authenticated, impossible to fake. Claire stood abruptly. I think that's my cue to leave. Sit down, Dylan snarled, but she was already walking away, heels clicking rapidly on the tile. Let her go, I said. Let Sophie go. It's done. Nothing's done. He pulled Sophie closer. I still have custody. Your word against mine. Actually, Ben's voice came from behind us. 2 police officers flanked him. You have multiple witnesses to assault of a minor, plus Sophie's testimony and evidence. Want to try for kidnapping too? Dylan's grip loosened. Sophie wrenched free, running to me. I held her tight, feeling her shoulders shake. You can't prove anything, Dylan said, but his voice wavered. Maybe not. I handed the USB drive to one of the officers. But the SEC and FBI can. They're very interested in both sets of books, the real ones, and the ones you tried to pin on me. Mom? Sophie looked up at me. I'm sorry I didn't tell you sooner. About any of it. Don't be. I smoothed her hair back, seeing Ben's eyes in her face for the first time. You were protecting me, just like I was protecting you. As the officers led Dylan away, Sophie turned to Ben. So. Should I call you Dad now? Ben's laugh was shaky. Let's start with lunch. We have a lot to talk about. I watched them walk ahead of me, already deep in conversation about coding and security protocols. My revenge had cost me a marriage built on lies, but it had given me something better: truth, freedom. And a family forged in honesty instead of manipulation. Sometimes losing everything was the only way to gain what mattered most. The autumn wind carried the scent of fresh earth as I walked the rows of our first smart farming prototype. Solar-powered sensors blinked among the crops, Sophie's coding bringing life to my agricultural tech designs. Our legacy, built from the ashes of Dylan's betrayal. The investors are impressed. Ben appeared beside me, tablet in hand. Full funding for the next phase. Your mother's farm will be the first full implementation. Sophie will be thrilled. I touched a sensor, remembering how she'd improved my original design. She's already talking about neural networks for crop prediction. She gets that from you. Ben's voice held a note of pride he was still learning to express. The brilliance, the determination. The stubbornness, I added, making him laugh. My phone buzzed, a news alert about Dylan's sentencing. 8 years for fraud and embezzlement. Claire had testified against him, her unborn child another victim of his manipulations. Sometimes I wondered if she'd known about Sophie all along, if that's why she'd finally chosen to help us. Still following the case? Ben asked. Last time. I deleted the alert. Sophie asked about visiting him. What did you tell her? That it's her choice. I turned to face him. Just like it's her choice whether to call you Dad. We can't protect her from everything. No, he agreed. But we can teach her to protect herself. Inside the monitoring station, Sophie sat surrounded by screens, her fingers flying over keyboards. She'd insisted on coming to work with me instead of starting high school, real-world experience, she'd argued. Besides, I've already completed most of their computer science curriculum. She looked up as we entered. Mom. The pattern recognition algorithm caught something weird in Sector 7. Show me. As she pulled up the data, I studied her face, so like Ben's when she was focused, but with my drive, my need to understand everything. She'd used those same traits to expose Dylan's crimes, to protect me when I thought I was protecting her. See? She pointed to an anomaly in the soil composition readings. If we adjust the irrigation here. Sophie, I interrupted gently. There's something we need to discuss. She stiffened. Is this about the letter? From Dylan? Ben and I exchanged looks. You knew? I monitor all our communications. She shrugged, but her voice wavered. Security protocols, remember? Honey. He wants to apologize. She turned back to her screens. Says he's changed. Wants to make amends. What do you want? I asked. I want. She took a deep breath. I want to show him this. What we built without him. How strong we are without him. Pride and pain mingled in my chest. My daughter, turning revenge into redemption, betrayal into growth. Speaking of building things, Ben said, breaking the tension. Your mom's funding came through. Want to help design the neural network? Sophie's eyes lit up. Really? Can we start now? After lunch, I said firmly. Family tradition, remember? As they gathered their things, still debating algorithm specifics, I looked out over our test field. The sensors blinked like stars fallen to earth, each one representing a choice, a consequence, a step toward healing. Dylan had tried to bury us, never realizing we were seeds. Now we'd grown into something stronger, something true. A family built on choice rather than obligation, on understanding rather than control. Mom? Sophie called from the doorway. You coming? Right behind you. I touched the sensor one last time, feeling its steady pulse beneath my fingers. Like a heartbeat, like hope, like the future we'd coded line by line, choice by choice, truth by truth. Some would call it revenge, this rising from the ashes of Dylan's destruction. But standing here, watching Ben and Sophie head toward the car, their heads bent together over some new idea, I knew better. This wasn't revenge. This was restoration. And we were just beginning.